We'll start with playing of the national anthem.
Thank you. Council, this evening we have two individuals that will be singing the national anthem for us. Audrey O'Hara, she is 13 years old in grade 8 at Indian Creek Public School, and Maria Whittle, who is 12 years old in grade 8 from McNaughton Public School. Welcome, girls.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for, God keep our land, God keep us glorious and free. We are free, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Well, it's going to be tough to beat that one, but we will try. We'll start with planning to see if that can beat the O Canada.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Sorry, we just did a couple things before. I was just getting so excited to get to planning. Just approval of supplementary agenda. Is there any supplementary?
Council, there is not a supplementary agenda this evening. However, item 12B2, the Ontario Heritage Act, has been requested to be pulled by administration this evening.
And disclosures of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, for open session agenda items and the general nature thereof. Councillor Solomon.
Planning items A, 9A, B, and C, an indirect conflict.
Okay, we'll kick into planning then.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The process to be followed for each planning application will be as follows. 1, the clerk will announce the item. 2, the mayor will ask if there is anyone present other than the applicant or his or her agent with an interest in the item, and to indicate so by raising their hand. 3, individuals or their agent present with an interest in the item other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to the podium, provide their name and address, and address council. 4, council will be asked if it has any questions of each presenter and then the applicant. 5, administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred. 6, council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the item. If there is no one present indicating an interest in the item, there will be no presentation by administration, and council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the item. If any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make oral or written submissions to the municipal clerk of the corporation or the municipality of Chatham-Kent before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as party to the appeal. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website. All persons receiving notice of this meeting will receive a notice of passing of a bylaw relating to any of the planning items presented here tonight if approved, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of passing or notice of council's decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk.
9A, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, PL 2019-00125, Bradley Farms Limited, 4939 Bradley Line, Community of Dover, North Kent.
Is the applicant, his or her agent, present? If so, please raise your hand. Noted. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, what action would council like to take with regard to the application? Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor McGrail?
Thank you. I'll second that.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 9B, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, PL 201900127, Bradley Farms Limited, Bradley Line, Community of Dover, North Kent.
Is the applicant, his or agent, present? If so, please raise your hand. Noted. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, what application or what action would council like to take with regard to this application? Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor McGrail?
I would love to second it.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 9C, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, PL 201900126, Bradley Farms Limited, Bradley Line, Community of Dover, North Kent.
Is the applicant, his or agent, present? If so, please raise your hand. Noted. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, what action would council like to take with regard to the application? Councillor McGrail?
I would like to move it, please.
Councillor Foss?
I'd be glad to second it.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 9D, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Monica Sawitka and Gregory Hunsedad, 15364 Muirkirk Line, Community of Orford, East Kent.
Is the applicant, his or agent, present? If so, please raise your hand. Noted. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I understand the applicant would like to speak for 1 minute prior to any questions the council might have.
I'll just start it. Sorry, excuse me.
Hi there, Monica Savitska here. So I just wanted to show off some of the photos from the last few months. So our kennel facility is crate-free and it is in-home boarding. So the whole property is now completely fenced with a 5-foot fence, and we just socialize the dogs throughout the day. We've had a lot of locals that have been extremely supportive of this that have actually never brought their dog to any facility because whether they have high anxiety or they've had really bad experiences with kennels, it's been such a pleasure to be able to provide a different kind of support that is needed out in our community. So I'm just really excited to move this forward and help the community by providing some in-home care. So please do enjoy the rest of the slides here. We did do some renovations there. So we had some old property with some swale, and we just added a little dog pool and a little patio for them to enjoy in the summertime. So we also do some organic dog treats at our agricultural property.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then I think there's just a quick little video. Hopefully it's not too loud because I know I'm giggling in it. Yeah. And then here's the video. You can see all the little ones are always separated from the large ones, so they just get socialized one-on-one, so everyone's nice and safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What action would council like to take with regard to the application? Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move the recommendations.
Councillor Wright.
I'd like to second that.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 10, deputation, 10A. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff and Council. I'm pleased to introduce Councillor Bonnie Rowe and Mayor Duncan McPhail from the municipality of West Elgin. They'll be presenting information on 4 counties transportation, which has been a great service available to Ward 3 residents for the past 20-plus years. So, welcome.
Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I missed it. I need to declare a conflict on 19A. I work at Family Service Kent.
Okay, noted.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Bonnie. You got the message.
Okay. Thank you very much for this chance to speak on behalf of the 4 counties transit service. And I know that you've all received this package in your agenda package, so I'm not going to, I'm going to try and stay within my 10 minutes. Essentially, the reason that we're here is to update councils, some of whom are new councillors, such as myself. I am new on the West Elgin Municipality Council, and I'm the chair of the 4 counties transportation services. Many of you will know Duncan McPhail, who is the mayor of West Elgin and also the warden of Elgin County, and he also sits on the committee. So the reason that we're here is to update you, to introduce ourselves and the service that we offer. And what we're not here to do is we're not here to ask you for any more money than we have this last year. So that's always a good news. So the history of 4 counties, it is a service that's been around for 27 years, providing rides to seniors and disabled persons. However, there is no eligibility criteria, and now we accept riders from any walks of life, age, or ability. The service is owned and operated by the West Elgin Municipality, and we have a committee of representatives from the partners who receive the service, and we are, by way of this meeting, extending an invitation to Chatham-Kent Council to send a representative to those meetings 4 times a year held at the municipal office in West Elgin. And you're more than welcome to come and join us in the decision-making about this committee. There are no administrative fees charged by West Elgin for this service. The map shows the catchment area, and as you can see for Chatham-Kent, the east side is covered through this service. And by the way, I believe that Chatham-Kent has been one of the early joiners of this partnership. So you've been a partner with us for a number of years. Bothwell, Highgate, Thamesville, Ridgetown, Morpeth are all covered by this transit service. And essentially, it is a service that started out with people who are within the catchment area of the 4 counties health services or hospital. And so people within this area do go into Newberry to the hospital there, and they also attend the day program. But that is only part of our ridership. People go to any of the villages to go shopping or attend appointments and so on. The bus is 14 passengers with 2 wheelchairs, or we can fit 4 wheelchairs and 8 passengers in the bus. And there's a page there with some of our comments from our riders. Last year we had 1,377 trips. About 45 people took those trips. And I want to say today that we do have capacity to increase our ridership within the edges of our catchment area without having to increase our staffing. So keep that in mind as we go along. I did include our budget for this year, and as you might expect, bus fees are one of our large parts of our revenue, as well as grants from partners. So yes, this is a subsidized service that all of our partners contribute towards. And of course, the gas tax is a very big help to this program. Under the expenditures, wages for 2 part-time staff who switch about. And then, of course, gas is a larger expense, and vehicle repairs and maintenance. This year, 2019, was the first year that we actually committed to putting some money into reserves, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's our budget, and it's not unduly different from most years' budgets. So here's our reserves, and over the last 5 years, you can see that they've dwindled. In 2015, we bought a new bus for $72,000, and since that time until this year, we haven't contributed to the reserve. So, provincial legislation does indicate that we need to replace our bus every 5 years, and the current bus is 4 years old. So our plan, and we are budgeting for a new bus replacement next year at the approximate cost of $90,000. Of course, there'll be some trade-in value to the current bus. So it's important that we do keep adding to the reserves to keep this service viable. So we put our heads together with regard to increasing revenue and how we might go about that to make it a stable and viable option. And our staff did apply for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Grant for public transit, and we were successful in receiving the provincial portion of that, and then the election came along and we didn't hear about the federal part. So we're hoping once the federal government gets back to work, we will be receiving notification about the federal part. And of course, we had in the application had to put in a portion from our own reserves. So as you can see, grants are important to keeping this service sustainable. Some of the other ideas that we have had at the committee in terms of increasing revenue are to increase our catchment area. And so with regard to Chatham-Kent, we would like to consider perhaps offering the service to Dresden. And right now, the map, as you might have noticed, is just brushes the corner of Dresden. So it doesn't actually go into the village. We did get some stats from 4 counties' health services as to who uses the hospital services, both inpatient and outpatient. And Dresden was right up there. There's 400 and something users per year of that service. And so it is a town that may very well be interested in using this service. So we'd like you to think about that. And wherever we have done this presentation to both Dawn Euphemia and Strathroy Caradoc, because just on the borders we often have people just over the border that ask if they can use the bus, and it's out of the area. So we will be considering those expansions very slowly so that we make sure that we can offer the service that we are right now. But we would be interested in having a conversation with you about Dresden. In terms of selling advertising, we will have a new bus next year, and so we're imagining that we might be able to sell some of those nice see-through signs on the bus, perhaps to companies that service seniors. And so if you have any of those in mind, perhaps along the eastern borders or otherwise that you think may be interested in buying advertising, please get in touch with our staff. In terms of donations, inside the brochure that I've left you, you'll see a list of service clubs, and they have been very good to us over the years, making donations. And we are thinking that for this particular campaign, we wouldn't ask service clubs to subsidize our service so much, but what we have heard from staff at the various long-term care facilities and care facilities that we service, that they don't have quite the budget that they used to run special trips, like taking people for seeing the colors in the fall or the Christmas lights and those sorts of things. And so we thought that that might be something that would appeal to service clubs to fund those special trips. And of course, it would help our ridership as well. So if you have any service clubs in mind that we should be in touch with, we'd love to hear about that as well. And then the last idea is raising user fees. It has been a few years since we have raised the fees. Right now, the current price for someone to take the bus within the whole catchment area, so they might be coming from Morpeth and going to Glencoe, and it's the same as if they were going, to Four Counties or Rodney or wherever. And it's $5 for a one-way trip or $10 for a round trip. So it's very modest, and we are thinking that it's probably time to increase that to $6 and $12. There is a special fee if you're going to have a bus load for a trip, or if you're going outside of the service area, and it's $35 an hour and a kilometer rate. So it is fairly high if you're going to spend a few hours, but we do have some special trips. So those are the ideas that we have for revenue generation to ensure that this service continues for as long as possible. And we have so many more seniors than we have in the past, and they all wish to stay at home for as long as possible. So this is one way that they can continue to be independent. So we would be glad to entertain any questions that you may have, and I hope to see a representative at our table. Any questions?
Councillor Pinsino?
Thank you, Your Worship. I represent East Kent here, and I hear nothing but good things. I know the money that our portion of your budget here, I know that's money well spent. I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
And it would be nice if you catch a little bigger piece of Chatham-Kent, maybe Dresden, whatever, but keep up the good work. You're doing a fine job.
Okay, thank you. And maybe you might like to join our committee since it's within your catchment area.
I'm a busy guy. I know where it is.
Well, thank you very much for coming down and letting us know what's going on, because, yes, there are some wonderful things going on with the service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other deputations?
So now we have one deputation for an item on the current agenda. These requests were received by 3 p.m. today. We have one from Paul Cherry. He's the chair of the Wallaceburg Adult Activity Center and is here to speak on item 19F, motion of Councillor Hall, Wallaceburg Community Hub. Welcome, and I'll remind you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, my name is Paul Cherry, and I am the chair of the Wallaceburg Adult Activity Center. And I'm here to ask council to support item 9F, motion by Councillor Hall, re Wallaceburg Community Hub. We, Wallaceburg Adult Activity Center, are a non-profit organization having a current membership of over 550 persons. The Wallaceburg Adult Activity Center is a place in our community where older adults congregate in order to socialize, exchange ideas, and develop a sense of belonging. The services we provide assist our citizens to relieve loneliness and isolation, improve mobility and fitness, as well as providing educational opportunities and support services that promote independence and interaction with others. We support this item with the suggestion that we be included in this hub. We currently serve senior population in an older two-story building with limited accessibility and parking. It is not suitable for an aging population, and it severely limits our ability to expand and offer new programming. The senior population is growing in our community, and we would like to be able to accommodate greater diversity, activities, and programs. We also believe a Wallaceburg Community Hub will enhance the municipality of Chatham-Kent, making it easier for residents of Chatham-Kent to access health, social, cultural, and other resources, making Chatham-Kent a better place to live. We believe in partnerships, and we believe in Chatham-Kent. Again, we support motion 9F, Wallaceburg Community Hub, tabled by Councillor Hall, and we ask that Council support this motion. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Chatham-Kent for your past and continuing support of Wallaceburg Adult Activity Centre. Thank you, Councillor Hall, for this motion, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for listening.
Thank you. Any items to be removed from the consent agenda and placed aside for consideration and debate separately? Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. 12B, 12B4, please.
Councillor B. McGregor.
7.
Councillor Kirkwood White.
Ditto.
Okay, and okay. Councillor Solomon.
12B1.
And Councillor Scacchi.
12A3.
Okay. Can I get a motion to accept all the ones not pulled?
Sorry, 12B3, sorry, my apologies.
12B3, okay. Okay. Can I get a motion to accept all the ones not mentioned? Councillor Kirkwood White, seconded by Councillor C. McGregor. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we'll start with Councillor Oche with 12B4.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure. I think she's running in at the moment. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Nancy, for doing this and getting in contact with me. I did forget to ask you one thing, and that's our price of a $153 renewal. Is that our cost, on that?
Through Your Worship, when we did the service review and we did all the fees for all the different types of licensing, we did include the cost for fire, health, and zoning for both for current applications, like the new applications, and then it would be just the fire and health for renewals.
Through Your Worship, I see London actually does a kind of a cool thing. They charge for the first health inspection or fire inspection of $171, and then they only charge $55 for renewal fee. So I'm assuming that, from what I could read, they have to fill out the information if there's a like to fire and health, and that they don't have an inspection every year. Is that something that we could do here?
I guess if that's something that council would like considered, it could be something that could be brought back to look into. It looks like they do a self-certification checklist by the property owners.
Correct, right. Through you again, Your Worship. Many of these very expensive ones, I know they're similar to our population in all of Chatham-Kent, but many of the ones that do not have a license fee or a renewal fee are more of the population of our small towns throughout Chatham-Kent. So I understand why we do it, obviously, but I guess I have a problem when we're up against Hamilton, but yet we're population-wise, yes, we're in 104,000 or so, but the small towns are still, yes, we're Chatham-Kent, but they're still unique to themselves. So, not that I don't want any fees, obviously, but I would like to see us more like London, I guess. And I guess that's not really a question to you, Nancy. I guess my question would be to management is, do I need to make a motion to bring something forward like that? I won't do it right at the moment, but I definitely would like to bring a motion. I want to do a little bit more studying on this because we're quite high compared to towns our size. Sorry, not the size of Chatham-Kent, but the size of each individual town. We're quite high compared to the other ones. So I don't know who can answer that for me. Judy?
Thank you, Councillor Oche. Yes, as Nancy has indicated, Council had given us the direction back at the time of the service review that we would be cost recoverable, and so it's simply the cost of the inspections, and that's the fee. If Council would wish to choose that from a procedural perspective, you could bring a notice of motion forward for us to look at, bring a report back, that kind of stuff, but it would be a requirement of a notice of motion to change the direction of Council.
Okay, so I'll leave it for tonight, but I will be bringing something forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this issue? We'll get approval on all four of them collectively when we're done here. So we'll go to the next one. Councillor B. McGregor for item 7, 12B7.
Thanks, Mayor Caniff. Just had a couple of questions on this report for Teresa. And first, I just think it really did capture sort of what we've been hearing about this issue in Chatham-Kent and what's been discussed with various community partners. So just reading through the report, it mentions there's some other communities that have gone down this road of a municipally led drug strategy. Could you maybe just touch on what those communities, which communities have gone that route, and maybe their challenges or strengths that they've provided in feedback?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor McGregor, through you, Mayor Caniff. There are a number of municipalities, both large and small, across Ontario that have their municipality lead their drug strategy. Some of those include Peterborough, Thunder Bay, Toronto, Waterloo Region, Wellington, Guelph, Kawartha Lakes, among a few others. I think that what we heard in our consultation with communities, they said 3 things to us that we heard very consistently make a drug strategy successful, one that is actioned in the community. The first is strong municipal leadership. The second is stable funding for coordination. So stable funding really means that the activities of all the stakeholders can be better coordinated, where important gaps and needs in the system can be identified and addressed. And the third thing was around accountability for results, so that the coordination and funding of the coordination of a program or strategy ensures some accountability for the results of that strategy overall.
Thank you. And there's also just to mention on the community partners that were talked to about this step. Can you maybe provide some of the feedback that you heard from them?
Sure. So in our consultation, we spoke to a couple of groups. The first being the Drug Awareness Council here in Chatham-Kent, that's made up of several key local stakeholders, and with the Municipal Drug Strategy Coordinators Network across the province. And so both experienced locally and in other communities, we heard from them that for a strategy to really have impact, it requires collective contribution from all the sectors in the community, and we need to work together across the 4 pillars of prevention, treatment, enforcement, and harm reduction. So hands down, we heard a stable funding of a coordinator, accountable to community decision makers, can really bring partners together for collective action in the community.
Thank
So
you.
pretty consistent communication, consultation across.
Yeah, and I think it's
Loud and clear.
important to note, and that's one of the things that that we heard is, this isn't just a big city issue.
No.
It's an issue that's affecting, everywhere in Ontario, everywhere in Canada, and some of those solutions are really unique to communities. So I think this is a really good step in understanding, if we want to be involved in this issue in Chatham-Kent, the commitment that council has to make. And I really appreciate the report. How it's laid out here, we'll discuss this in budget. So I just wanted to make a motion that we accept the report and refer it to the 2020 budget process for consideration of the budget committee.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
I'll second the motion, and then I have another question, if you don't mind, through you, Mr. Mayor. I know that this is an information report, Teresa, but the budget calls for $110,000, and I know in the past that the municipality has supported a mobile harm reduction program through AIDS Windsor, and I'm wondering whether this in any way would preclude us having to partner with that particular group on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, through you, Councillor, Mayor, no. That work continues with Chatham-Kent Public Health and AIDS Chatham-Kent. Certainly we provide that service once a week, but know that there are really opportunities to expand our needle syringe program across Chatham-Kent.
Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I, too, thought it was a very comprehensive report, Teresa. I wanted to, and I liked actually that the options for the $110,000 spending could include a municipal employee, which I'm not totally sold on, but I would like to talk more or think more about partnering with a current community stakeholder or partner who has the expertise and the lead and would help us provide this stable funding. I think we have the political will. I think it's very strong here, and I think that will continue. I think, yes, we need to be part of enabling the stable funding, but if we could find some community partner or community partners that would be stable partners that would assist us in setting up accountable evaluation of how those funds are being used. I know there are many people in the community who are very concerned about this, that feel that thus far we have been putting more and more money into Band-Aids that are not making a difference. So I'd like this to be looking at some permanent strategies and looking at those structures that we help set up that reinforce some healthy living versus the substance abuse. And I think that's our role, to enable and make sure we have that stable funding that backs up our will.
I think we're certainly open to any kind of model that supports coordination of a drug strategy, and partnering with another community agency on a contractual basis or something like that is certainly an option.
As long as we ensure that the stability is very important, I appreciate that, but I also know that we have to be accountable to our citizens too, and that we don't have all the answers, and I think there's some good things happening out there that we could leverage our monies and to really meet the needs.
Sure, absolutely. There are lots of great things happening in this community. We have strong partnerships, and they're really quite a great community to be in.
Thank you.
Any other questions relating to item number 7? Seeing none, we'll put that particular item to vote. It's up on the screen there, what you're voting on.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Councillor Solomon on item 12B1.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only comment I wish to make is that it's a short report, and I appreciate the update. This is with respect to the motion of council a year ago for the sale of the WDC rail. And I do appreciate the update from our administration it's so people understand it. It's 13 years ago. Some would say an unlucky 13. That the majority of the council of the day voted in favor of acquiring this rail line and started down the path of railway ownership. It hasn't been a productive or cost-effective experience at all, so I'm happy to see that our staff is working hard to, and I wish them well in their efforts to shed the taxpayers of this, what some people describe as a mistake, and I look forward to future reports so the money that we get back, hopefully, if it's sold, can be used for our core responsibilities, which are roads and other infrastructure. And I hope we'll get future reports that will come forward and bring us good news for the taxpayers on this front. So I'm really looking forward to, and I'll keep asking for these reports, because 13 years is a long time to be in a business that is not our core business, and pumping $60,000 a year into over a 13-year period, plus all sorts of other expenses, legal and otherwise, for an asset that really is more of a liability than an asset. But I appreciate providing us with the report, and I appreciate that it takes a lot of hard work to shed an asset, well, or a liability like this. To someone, it probably will be an asset, but we're not railway operators. The best suggestion that I heard in the past is the McDonald's caboose should go on, but I'll leave that alone for now.
Any other questions relating to that one? Seeing none, we'll go to Councillor Sakachi for 12B3.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a couple quick questions in regards to the parameters of the numbers that are scoped out in this report. Are those numbers set out? Is there any way that we could manipulate those numbers, or is that something that is set by MPACT as well as the MNR?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. These numbers are set out either by MPAC or by the MNR, so we cannot change them.
So what the scope is basically what they are?
Yep.
That's all I have then for you. Thank you.
Councillor OJ.
Thank you, Your Worship. Since I asked for this this report, I just have, if I could ask one question on this, Matt, if so the managed forest, that 25%, that is set by the MNR, or is that correct?
Well, yes, it's set in yes. No, the 25% is set in for the legislation for tax rates.
Like Chatham-Kent's legislation?
No, like in the Municipal Act, like managed forests are set at 25%. So in other tax classes, we have the ability to set rates within a range, but for managed forests, it's a hard 25%. It has to be 25%.
Okay, because I just find it very difficult that farmland is cheaper than a forest land.
So in the farmland class, council has there's a range. It's up to 25%. So council has chosen to set it at 22%, right. Which is lower.
And do the farmers is there a way of getting this out to them? Do they all know that they're eligible for these?
I'm not sure. The programs administered by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, or the applications for those are posted on their website. Certainly we could use our communication tools through the municipality to put that out through various means if so directed.
It sure would be nice for some of them. I see like there's some really good ones. Obviously under 20 acres is good zero tax. So it just would be nice to have the farmers maybe to make sure that they know this, because that way, Gord's got it. Or Don.
Mr. Shropshire.
Thank you, Worship. we can undertake, administration can undertake to make sure that this information that's included in the report can be distributed to all the major farming organizations in Chatham-Kent. And the fact that council's raised this tonight is also a great way to get the message out. So we will make sure that over the course of the next week, all of the major farming agencies receive this as a formal record of the options available.
Okay, so we don't need a motion or anything. You'll just do that. Great. Thanks very much. That's everything.
Councillor Thompson?
Don't sit down, Matt. Thank you. This is strictly in regards to property tax programs, right? What you brought forward.
Yes.
Right. So I want to make everybody aware that, and maybe Matt could answer it. I'll kind of lead him here, but there are other programs available for woodlot owners.
I am not directly familiar with them.
Okay.
We can do some
so like
research into
Alice, Chatham-Kent would pay a farmer to have a woodlot. Is one program. As well, since these are strictly, we asked you about woodlot property tax programs, that doesn't preclude the possibility of Chatham-Kent potentially putting in some sort of grant program or something of our own, would it?
No, it would not at the direction of council.
Which is, I think, what Councillor Sakachi was aiming at there. So I would just like to add the Alice and maybe the Lower Thames as well to the information we sent out to all those major farm groups. There are other programs available, not just property tax programs. There are cash incentives as well. So just something I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of. Thanks.
Any other questions relating to that? Seeing none, Councillor Oche, can I get a motion to accept 12B4, 12B1, and 12B3?
I'll motion that.
And Councillor Solomon, can I get a motion to accept a second by get 12B4, 1, and 3? He can? Okay. Okay, all of them. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 13, notices of motion. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I, Councillor Michael Bondi, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the December 2nd, 2019 council meeting for discussion and voting. That staff review all traffic lights in the municipality to ensure effective traffic flow. Secondly, all pedestrian signals be properly synced with traffic lights. That staff complete this project and report back to council by April 2020. Thank you.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, Councillor Mark Oche, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion on December 2nd, 2019 council meeting for discussion and voting. That we look at London's bed and breakfast bylaw of $165 initial fee plus $171 fire inspection fee and a renewal fee of $55. Adding to this, a fire inspection being needed every 5 years at $171 of the cost to cover Chatham-Kent expenses. Sorry, I don't know what the January date is when we come back to bring a report. Sorry.
First meeting date in January would be the 13th of January.
January 13th would be the first date.
Okay, to bring a report January 13th, 2020. Thank you.
Hey, item 14, tender awards.
Item 14A, request for proposal award RFP R19-219, Bloomfield Business Park Phase 2.
Councillor Thompson.
Happy to move the recommendation.
Councillor Sakachi.
Equally as happy to second that.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 15, Community Human Services.
Item 15A, rent geared income centralized wait list trends. Your Worship, we have a presentation by Shelley Wilkins, Director of Housing Services.
Good evening. So my apologies for my eyesight's getting bad and I can't see. So, does this work? Okay. In your packages, you had an information report from me, and I just want to do a presentation. A number of council members have contacted me in recent months asking about the status of our social housing. One of the key indicators of social housing in a municipality is the wait list for rent geared to income assistance. So under the Housing Services Act, service managers are required to have coordinated access to social housing, which is also known as a centralized wait list, or CWL. Service managers report on the status of the CWL as of December 31st to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and we've been doing that since 2001. Also, annually, we report on the status of our wait list in the annual Housing and Homelessness Progress Report, and we've been doing that since 2014. So as I said, social housing wait list is for rent geared to income assistance, and at October 31st, as you can see up there, oh, maybe not, pushed back, but is there a pointer on there? Do you know? Okay, no pointer. Okay, so in 2019, you can see the total there. We had 953 applicants on our wait list as of October 31st of 2019. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. This first slide shows the breakdown by year for 2016, 17, 18, and as I said, to October 31st of this year. It's also broken down by community, by urban community, I should say, and rural Chatham-Kent, as well as applicant households from outside of Chatham-Kent. And so our wait list is based on where the primary applicant is residing at the time of their application. We do that to ensure that we don't double count any household on the wait list that may choose to be on the wait list for several locations. I'm sure it's no surprise to council that Chatham has the highest number of applicants, followed by Wallaceburg. Given that Chatham has around 41% of Chatham-Kent's population, these figures do confirm that people in need of community supports do tend to migrate to the largest urban center in the community. For example, you can compare that to the figure for rural Chatham-Kent at 8.7% of the centralized wait list, when the population is closer to 37% of the population. You will note that our centralized wait list has more than doubled since 2016. The next two slides that I'm going to show you break down by community and bedroom size. The other CK rural grouping includes Bothwell, Dresden, Ridgetown, and Wheatley. The vast majority of the centralized wait list is for one-bedroom units. In 2019, we're at a total of 692 units when you combine all the one-bedrooms up for the three age groups. So we group them by 16 to 59-year-olds, which is the under 65, the 65 and older. And we also do the seniors that are between 60 and 64. So 73% of our wait list are singles and couples who qualify for the one-bedroom units. Each dependent qualifies for one bedroom. Our two-bedroom wait list is second highest at 114 right now, or 12%, followed closely behind by three-bedroom units at 110, or 11% of the wait list. And at a distant fourth is the four-bedroom unit at 37, or 4% of the wait list. With respect to seniors, we have a cascading age policy, with the first priority given to seniors 65 and older, and second priority given to seniors who are 60 to 64. Our 65-plus applicants account for 16% of the wait list, and the 60 to 64 age group makes up 10%, for a combined total of 26% for seniors. Families account for a total of 27% of our centralized wait list for the 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. So an overwhelming majority of our wait list are singles or couples in the 16 to 59 age group. In Chatham-Kent, social housing has a total of 1,592 prescribed units under the Housing Services Act. Under that number, 1,365 are targeted for RGI, and the remaining 126 are targeted for market rent units. Private nonprofits maintain their own separate wait lists for their market units, so we don't have that mixed in our wait list. Our social housing supply is static, so we only get to house an applicant household from our wait list when one of our units become vacant and has been made ready to be filled again. What the numbers are in terms of centralized wait lists by different categories is one way to look at it. And the other important way to look at it, and the way that most of our applicants look at it, is how long is it going to take before you offer me a unit? So, the one-bedroom age group that I have up there now is for the 16 to 59-year-olds. Altogether, we have 568 non-senior one-bedroom units throughout 8 urban areas in Chatham-Kent. Chatham, of course, has by far the most applicants, who are waiting on an average of 3.6 years or 43 months, whereas Wallaceburg has far fewer on the wait list, but the average wait is longer at 4.7 years or 56 months. We have a mandated seniors housing in 4 communities, with a total of 234 units. For seniors who are 60 to 64 on the one-bedroom wait list, the seniors from Chatham have the longest wait at 6.1 years or 73 months, and that's followed by other CK rural applicants at 2.2 years. For seniors 65 for the one-bedroom 65 and older for the one-bedroom units, the longest wait times are for Blenheim applicants at 3.8 years or 45.7 months, followed by Chatham applicants at 2.3 years or 27.5 months. Family housing consists of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units across the 4 communities. The longest wait times are by far for Wallaceburg applicants for the 4 bedroom units. I'll just let you look at these for a second. So for the 4 bedroom units in Wallaceburg, they're waiting 3.7 years on average, or 44.4 months, followed by applicants from outside of Chatham-Kent at 2.6 years or 30.6 months. And also, it's the longest wait. Second longest wait is also for the 4 bedroom units. So to summarize, 1 bedroom units, non-senior units in Chatham are in highest demand at 234 applicants, while 1 bedroom units for cascading age seniors in the 60 to 64 has the longest wait at 6.1 years, or 73.4 months for Chatham applicants. So that's all I have in my presentation, so I'd be happy to answer questions.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to ask a question regarding this, but Tilbury used to have a housing, it's now Skyline Living. Did Chatham-Kent ever own that? Do you know? The reason I'm asking is I know they're like more than just one bedroom. So, and I see there's a few of them needed in Tilbury. So I'm just wondering if we ever owned that, or if that was always, or if it was ever a low income unit. I've been told many times that it was, but I'm not positive.
Thank you, Your Mayor. Through you to Councillor Oche. We have not disposed of any housing stock that the municipality owned in Tilbury, so I would say no. I'm not sure of what property you're speaking of precisely, but Skyline does own a lot of multi-residential throughout Chatham-Kent.
Yeah, it was on Fort Street. Well, it is on Fort Street, but it never was Skyline until just a few years back. But all right, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, through your worship. So I see the trends, how they're increasing, but now can you just estimate like the wait times in regards to like how fast they're accelerating in regards to what you've seen like many years ago? Like, you know, from the actual standpoint of them actually waiting? Because I know those are estimated times, but is there ever a time where you would see more come available than a little bit more rapidly? Or is it something that you're seeing that people are in those for longer periods and, you know, have to sustain the housing?
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. Through the mayor to you. What I put up here now is to show you the vacancy rate compared to our RGI application waitlist rate. So in the presentation, you have seen that we doubled our rates, more than doubled the number of applicants on our waitlist in a matter of a couple of years. And I believe what's happened is the vacancy rate has gone down to close to 2%. It hovers around there right now. It's actually less for one-bedroom units. It's under 2%, 1.7 in Chatham. And so people can't find affordable housing. And so instead of just being borderline on their own somewhere and trying to make do, they're not able to do that, and so they're applying to us. And so you can see our wait list has just shot up incredibly as the vacancy rate has come down. Now, what we believe has happened is that we've lost a lot of apartments to condominiums, but also through the transition of different properties to other landlords, they've used those opportunities to substantially increase their rental rates. And so we've seen the rental rates for units really increase over time because other landlords catch on to that too, that the demand is there, the supply is not, so they can really jump their rates when their units turn over. A lot of them are under the rent control guideline while there's a sitting tenant, but when a unit turns over and you get to fill it with someone else, those rules don't apply. So the rental rates have really gone up.
And you talked about specifics about ages. Now, where does somebody who, say, is a single mom with a couple kids that really needs to get into an area, so maybe she could then get out into the work field and have some substantial living arrangements, where does she fall on this list now? Where does somebody who has two kids, who has no way to basically live affordably, what are they doing in the meantime? Like, I'm sure that you speak to these families all the time, and I know obviously seniors it's very important that we're targeting that age group, but what are we doing for the single mothers or the single fathers that are having a really difficult time in being younger?
Thank you for your question. So for someone with a single parent or a couple, it doesn't matter because they only are eligible for one bedroom. So if you have a dependent, each dependent is eligible for their own bedroom. So if you have 2 kids, then you have 3 bedroom you're eligible for to apply. But as you can see, the wait lists are long, and even if the wait lists are a little shorter than some, it's the amount of time you also have to wait. Unfortunately, a lot of them are not getting housed through us for social housing because we just simply don't have it. On average, we turn over probably about 15 units a month in terms of housing people off the wait list into housing, but we also take in on average about 100 applications a month. So there's no way we can house them all, and so they end up staying on our wait list. In the meantime, we do have right now 22 portable housing benefits, so people that qualify for that get that. We also have some rent supplement, but we're limited in those numbers too, so I haven't included rent supplement in here, but we have 115 units of rent supplement right now. We also have 50 units of housing allowance under the Investment in Affordable Housing Program, and some provincial rent supplement units as well. But at the end of the day, the people on this wait list are waiting that long. How they're managing while they're not getting financial assistance through us is they're probably going without food and using the food banks as much as they can. A lot of them are living with other family members in crowded situations, or with friends, and just couch surfing, whatever they have to do to get by. Some of them are at the women's shelter, but the domestic violence victims do get housed quicker, so their waits are not nearly as long. But the majority of people are waiting these long, long periods, and it's very difficult.
And it's just for one more thing to add, because I know that just this is very important to myself. I really love the community that we're in, but these numbers to me are alarming. It's scary. And I guess, we talk about like climate emergencies and stuff like that. In your opinion, where our wait list is now, like 50 months for me, that's not a wait list. 50 months to somebody who needs their housing, that's an eternity. So would you say that we're at crisis level right now, or you think that this is borderline, like because you've been in it so long, would you think that we are seeing a crisis amount of beds that we are requiring, rooms that because obviously what we thought we had to do 2 years ago is now that much accelerated. So something, the people around this table really have to start brainstorming and ideas to try to come up with something to do. We'll be talking about budget soon, but these are people of our community that right now are falling through the cracks. So I think that as a whole, everybody here has to brainstorm and think the best possible solutions, including staff, so we can seal these cracks up and ensure that we have some more housing available for these. And I'll close it out there. I just wanted your opinion. Do you think that we're in a crisis situation now, or just in an emergency situation?
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to answer that one. I do believe we're in a crisis situation, but we're also not different from the rest of the majority of the province. Housing is a crisis situation all across Ontario, except in Northern Ontario, and they have different issues in Northern Ontario. It's a crisis in a lot of other provinces as well, not just Ontario. So housing supply is not kept up with the demand, and we're seeing the impacts of it now. And so those that do have the rental units are able to charge just about, as much as they would like, because they're in a situation, and you can't blame landlords who are in it for a profit, able to get more out of their investment. But what hasn't happened is social housing stopped being built in the early 1990s, and the multi-residential has not kept pace with the demand. And so we're seeing the impacts of it.
Just wanted to thank you and your whole team for all the work that you are doing. And my final comment is the housing crisis can also weigh in on the mental health aspect. Somebody not being, safe and in a safe environment, that causes more hardship to the community. So thank you to your team. And if there's anything that you ever need from my perspective, I would appreciate you, any member of your team, contacting me. And all the community members listening, we are getting close to the Christmas season. This is a perfect time for you to donate food to the food bank, clothing to any organization around, and do the best to help and support our neighbors.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just have a couple questions then, because I'm a little confused. So, within the last year here, we've been going through and we've approved some of the projects going forward. Now, are they exempt too? Because you touched a little bit on, after, the first initial rounds and the individuals are in there, but if they move out, then they're allowed to charge what have you. Is that fair to say for those building projects too? Or are they mandated to be a geared to income kind of unit for a certain amount of time, or is there a time limit on that?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Through you to Councillor McGrail. So what I was speaking of in terms of rents jumping is the private sector landlords who are not part of social housing and not part of the affordable housing programs. The affordable housing that we have is very limited in number. Unfortunately, we haven't been fortunate enough to get huge investments in that over time. And in fact, for next year, under the new Ontario Provincial Housing Initiatives, which you'll see in your budget, we're down to $254,000 for federal provincial contribution next year. It's scant money. That doesn't go a long way. It doesn't matter what you're doing. The affordable housing projects that we do enter into contribution agreements with, the first set of them, probably about the first 5, we only did 20-year agreements, but the last set that we've been doing, we extended that to 25 years, recognizing some of those 20-year ones will be coming up soon. So, and we're only talking, with all of the investment that's gone into that, 96 new units altogether. So the other thing with the affordable housing, it's different from social housing, because in social housing, if you're rent geared to income, you get rent geared to income assistance. If you're in affordable housing, if we don't have a rent supplement attached to your unit, you're getting a break on the rent, that it's 20% below average market rent, but how much money you make doesn't make a difference in terms of any more assistance unless we attach rent supplement to it. Okay?
Thank you, and thank you for setting me straight on that too. So one more question, the nonprofit side. How many units do you suspect, because you don't track that, are out there that people have taken advantage of that avenue, going through nonprofits and stuff, going through the municipality for help with rentals? Do you have any idea?
So for social housing, all of the private nonprofits that we fund, and there is social housing in Chatham-Kent that we do not fund and we don't administer, but it's quite limited. Nova Housing is one federal co-op that we're not involved with, and the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Society funds the Wallace Street project, and they have 10 rural native projects. But so other than that, Chatham-Kent is it for social housing. And the centralized wait list that we maintain is for all the private nonprofits. Anyone that's getting RGI subsidy has to come through us first.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, through the mayor. I echo Councillor Sakatchi's sentiments. I think these numbers are unacceptable. And I wondered, there is a report coming to council with regard to development incentives. Does that, what is the status of that report? And does that report include specific incentives for senior affordable housing? Can anybody answer that question? Anybody here from planning?
Thank you for your question. I can answer it partially, and maybe John can can assist in answering part of it. So, Council authorized us to hire Vink Consulting back in December of 2018. And we worked with Vink Consulting, and they have completed their report. And we have a draft report, or had a draft report, that's in the works. And planning is assisting with that as well. But I believe we're going to be meeting again to finalize what that report will be. And originally, I think it was intended to come December 2nd, but I've heard tonight it might not be till January. So I don't know if John wants to add anything.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. We are preparing various incentives to come to council to incentivize the development and construction of all types of housing. So what you have heard tonight is really housing for the most needy, which is extremely important. And in addition, we want to incentivize that type of housing as well as market rent housing, as well as multi-residential housing, various types of housing to be built in our community. We're hearing not only from the most needy, but also from people who have jobs who are saying they can't find housing, or they can't find housing that they can afford. So we're trying to put a comprehensive plan in place, which will include incentive programs for developers to build. We're also looking at ways to raise funds so that we can have funds in our capital budgets to build infrastructure that is desperately needed. We're hearing from developers that they won't build because there's not enough infrastructure in existing lands. So there's a large number of complex and different issues that we're trying to gather all together. We're going to be bringing this forward to council. We've begun this under what we're calling our growth strategy, which goes even broader than housing and includes business growth. But we'll be bringing that forward. We've initiated that this past week with our Community Development Advisory Committee, and that is progressing through to the first council report on our statistical analysis is coming on December 2nd. And then I expect we're going to have incentivized programs specifically that you're asking about in January or February.
Well, I'm glad to hear about the statistical evidence. I think we've got a lot of it right here tonight. And I think as a society, we're going to be, well, not going to be, we are judged on how well we take care of our most vulnerable. And right now, we have people that are not housed. So I would like to have staff, or make a motion for staff to bring back to council a report outlining incentives specifically geared to addressing the lack of 60-plus senior one-bedroom units. I would also like to hear some specific solutions that involve home sharing programs that reinforce intergenerational support, being that for a senior and or for single moms with kids. We have a lot of seniors living out in our communities who are...
Sorry, as you go on, if you want that as a motion, transcribe it. It's
all right. And to involve interim housing program, other alternative internal or interim housing programs. Well, I could write it down here, because I really think it's important we address this now and not wait till January, because we have to keep it in mind for our budget coming up in 2020, because I don't want to wait to 21 and 22 to address this. It needs to be addressed sooner than that. Logistically.
So maybe you could...
Yep.
So if you could write it down,
yep.
And I'll go over to Councillor C. McGregor, and we'll address her questions, and maybe you might have it ready, and I'll go back to you.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Shelley, I want to thank you very much for that report. I know I was one of the people looking for that information, so I greatly appreciate the time and work that goes into these reports for you to bring us information. You can probably tell by the conversation going on around the table that there's a lot of people invested in this crisis that we have going on. Most of my questions did get answered, but a few. You almost got there on one and you stopped halfway through and I didn't get the answer. Scenario, you have a single or a couple with 3 children. Would you, because of a time wait or whatever, would you put them into a 3-bedroom unit, allowing children to share, or do they have to have single? Is there some rule out there that they each have to have a bedroom? Because a lot of times you have young kids, you could easily put 2, and most of us do. I know when I was raising my children, I had kids that shared bedrooms as they were growing up. So,
thank you. Happy to address that one too. So, under the Housing Services Act, applicants we have occupancy standards for applicants. What the occupancy standard does is say, this is the largest unit you qualify for. Applicants are able to apply for a smaller unit. If they do, though, and we don't have many that do want to do that, but some will, say, for example, if they believe they could get housed faster. But then they have to agree that they can apply for an internal transfer to a larger unit for a year. Mm-hmm. So, because it adds costs to the process, it also adds delays for other applicants, because it takes longer to house somebody that moves into one unit and moves to another than to house 2 people going into 2 separate units, just because of the process and getting units ready.
And I can understand that, because you probably get some people in and then they want to instantly move to the first available. But when I see the wait time in Wallaceburg for 4-bedroom units, I'd probably be quite willing to take a 3-bedroom unit if it meant getting proper housing in place. So, so that was the one. The other, and I know Councillor Leclerc is putting a motion together there, but something that that I read through the Globe and Mail that I found very interesting is what Toronto's doing, and apparently they are decreasing their footprint within City Hall, making their office in their areas and sharing more space and moving people from outer offices into City Hall and turning their excess buildings into affordable housing units. And I don't know if that's ever been thought of. We're looking at plans at looking at, our stock of buildings, and, maybe we need to be a little creative that way in methods of finding other ways to create more affordable housing with the buildings and units that we have within this community.
Thank you. The only comment I would add is that the draft report that was looking at ways to incentivize more affordable housing does include policy recommendations around surplus buildings, surplus properties, things of that nature, other ways to fund affordable housing. However, at the end of the day, we also recognize it's one taxpayer, and so you take money from here for this, and then you don't have money for something else somewhere else. So we do understand that, but it does look at the whole issue of how other ways of looking at properties.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the risk of repeating myself, I did make a mention at the last council meeting about another housing opportunity coming up that you'll learn a little more about before the end of the year. But there are other options for housing, and I think that will, secondary suites, as an example, are now approved. So there will be some other opportunities that hopefully will address some of the issues that we're facing right now.
I did just want to take this opportunity too, in case there are developers listening or watching. Earlier I said we're the the only action as far as incentivizing affordable housing, but there is the co-investment fund from the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation through the federal government. And while the service manager is asked to provide input, it is a completely separate funding program. And so I would encourage anyone that's interested to visit CMHC's website too for that information.
Okay, over. Councillor C. McGregor?
Sorry, to extend this on. I'm just also wondering when we're looking at some of this about looking into our bylaws. It's my understanding that in Chatham-Kent, you cannot build granny suites onto your property. And that was my understanding, is that we do not allow that. Bruce's. Because I'm thinking that that is also a good venue to, when we have a lot of seniors in their own home that would like to move to a condo, might be just as interested in moving to a granny suite at the back of their children's property.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. We actually do permit secondary units or granny suites or whatever else they may be referred to. Right now, we permit one. It can be either in your home or it could be in an accessory building such as you just described in your backyard. There's certain bylaw requirements. We made that change. There was a change in the Planning Act from a few years ago. It was adopted in our zoning bylaw. I'm trying to remember now, at least a year and a half ago now. I think maybe there's a better opportunity here now to promote it and say people there's this option out there. The other piece that just happened in the act changed again, where it now allows you to do two. So that's something that municipalities now have to look at and look at your regulations as well. The one thing we don't do, and in accordance with this act, is we currently allow them in our urban areas where we have servicing, but most municipalities are allowing them even in agricultural areas with some constraints to say maybe you limit them. Because the risk you don't want to run is start having, two side-by-side homes of the same size, right? And then somebody comes along later, I want to sever this house. So you want it tied in somehow so it is truly a secondary unit to even an agricultural parcel. So the answer is yes, we do.
Okay, so I appreciate that. Then obviously whoever I was talking to was before there was changes in the legislation. So, but maybe that's something we need to get out there a little more widely too, because I think there's still people out there that think that it's not permitted.
Councillor Wright?
Oh, there. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Shelley, now, if you have a tenant now and they want to move to another area, do they go on this list or is that a separate list for them? Like, is this 953, is that new individuals or?
Thank you for your question through Mayor Caniff. So you can be living anywhere in Chatham-Kent or outside of Chatham-Kent and apply. What we do is track it by the primary the primary applicant, because many people will apply for multiple locations hoping to get offered housing anywhere. So they will apply for many different locations. So to avoid the issue of double counting anyone, we don't count it by where people have applied to. We simply count it from where they're living when they apply. Okay.
April?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The motion as written, it's not as written. Okay. I just need.
Councillor Latimer has gone back to help explain what her intent is of the motion, so they're drafting it right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Caniff, maybe I can, while we're waiting for, so we will be coming out with, I'm not sure if I wasn't clear, but we are coming out with a report to council that will provide incentives for affordable housing, in addition to incentives for other types of housing. So I think that's the intention of that motion, is what we're already covering it, I think. So I'm not sure we need that motion. The other thing I'll say too is we are trying to incentivize the private sector to build affordable housing. And that, of course, is much more difficult because we have to find a way to help the private sector to put up their own dollars to build. And that will take longer time to do in the sense that the private sector needs to be incentivized, and they need to think about it, then they need to make the investment and the plans and the steps. Certainly the fastest way to get affordable housing is for governments of different levels to give Shelley more money and she'll build more affordable housing. We're certainly for that. What we're working on as well is how do we incentivize the private sector to do this? And there's no magic bullet, there's no quick answer to that, but that's what we're working on.
Councillor Latimer, where you were back there, Mr. Norton went through and said that in January they're coming with a full report of what incentives they're going to propose to build housing, and I'm not sure just what is this motion adding to that. We just wanted to clarify there that Mr. Norton was saying that kind of the motion doesn't need to be made because he's doing this, but is there additional things you're looking for over and above incentives for housing?
I'm concerned about the immediacy and the specific incentives to build affordable housing for seniors. And incentives that would include support of intergenerational home sharing and or other alternative housing programs. There are other things that are being done that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I agree, like I don't want to stop your report, but I think your report is more general. I want this to be specific, and I want us to be able to use it sooner than later, and specifically for the upcoming budget.
April?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Through to Councillor Latimer. So I think I'm understanding in terms of looking at things that we want some stuff ahead of budget. So certainly from housing services, from community human services, we are right now working on budget at EMT level, and we do have some significant asks in there that will be presented both to the community and to council to address some of the immediacy of requiring affordable housing. I do think I want to say that certainly to build affordable housing, whether we build that ourselves or we provide incentives for builders to build, it is very costly to build. And certainly I think Shelley's point is well taken that as the levels that are coming from other levels of government are going down, that provides us with less and less capital dollars to build. And in our last builds, our last go around, where we had what seemed like significant dollars to build, it costs around $120,000 to build one unit. So to house the 800 people that are 800 plus that are on that, if we looked at just building, it's astronomical amounts of money. So I appreciate the alternative methods. So we can take that back, and I think the incentives are one piece. It's all the other ideas that make up the other part of this, and that's where I think we need to spend some more time on.
So so to confirm then, this is something, if this motion is put through, this is something effectively between April and Mr. Norton, the two of you are working together, and you're working towards this already, but we put the motion forth, and that doesn't create an issue for you to, as I know, Councillor Latimer, you want to do this in pretty quick terms for the budget.
Well, I'm thinking we should put a timeline on that. To be brought back, like would that help? Or would it make it worse for you?
Well, because your concern is to ensure there's money in the budget for it, but not necessarily the solution. So if there's more of a generic, here, we haven't figured all the detail of it. You'll never be able to figure it out in the next 2 months, all the detail, but if we can ensure there's going to be money set, at least looked at and voted on during the budget, that would meet what your direct requirements would be.
Because I would also like starting the partnerships. I realize it's a lot of money, but there's also a lot of partnerships involved in that, in the alternative housing strategies. While we're putting money aside and gathering up partners that are going to actually build the units. And April, you're very right. I appreciate you gathering the sentiment of what I'm trying to say. Yep.
All right, so you're going to put this motion forth. Can I have a seconder for this motion?
No seconder?
Councillor Harrigan. Any other
Sure, I'll
questions related to this motion? Councillor Kirkwood-White?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a problem with the notion. I have a problem with zeroing in on one particular demographic because there are other folks in the community that we need to support, and there are other things happening that I'm aware of and others are aware of that are going to address that very issue. And I would hate to see extra work being created if it's already happening. That's my only point.
And that's what I'm trying to get through there is this already happening? And from what I'm hearing, it is. You can confirm, Ms. Dyke and Mr. Norton?
Can I just comment? I think if I could clarify that I believe we have a number of things in the budget. The only one that I'm not aware of us doing anything with, I'm aware of the age-friendly committee looking at the idea of how to encourage in the intergenerational home share program. That is not something that's being contemplated, as far as I know, in the 2020 budget request.
Okay, so can you confirm that this is what you're working on, Ms. Dyke and Mr. Norton?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I concur with Shelley. So we have issues around our affordable housing. We have not looked at the alternative issues. So we need to take that back and do a bit kind of deeper dive into looking at some of the intergenerational home share, things like that. So, which, as Shelley's indicated, the age-friendly committee is looking at that as well. But certainly we can do some more work in that area.
Okay, so Councillor Latimer, you want to continue with this motion, put this out, given that, or it's your choice?
I really want the intergenerational home share and the alternative term housing looked at. So if you want to take out the senior, just looking at include specific incentives to support affordable housing, including intergenerational home share programs and our alternatives interterm housing programs to meet immediate severe lack of available affordable housing. So to support affordable housing, just take out the senior, and then that takes care of that for you. Is that okay, Shelley?
Councillor Harrigan, are you okay with those changes?
Yes. Thank you, Melissa.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll put this,
Take the word build out and put support.
Okay, just keep your hands up here just to.
Oh, sorry.
All right, we'll go to the seconder, Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick comment that as council, we've done something like this before where councillors ask for just specific additions or modifications to ensure that the staff report includes some new or different information. So that's why I seconded this and that's why I support this. Thanks, Councillor Latimer, for bringing it up.
Councillor Thompson?
I'm a little unclear. So I guess in general terms, how much sand does this throw in the machine? How many wrenches does it throw in the works? Like, I don't know if I want to support it because on one hand I'm hearing that we're doing this already, but then I'm hearing we're not, and now I'm wondering how much sand is this going to throw in the machine?
Mr. Shropshire, can you add?
Thank you. So I think there's at least 3 major planks. I think we're working on 2 of them, and as April's described, there's a 3rd one that we actually need to expand. I think that's what Councillor Latimer is getting at. So the commitment we'll make to is Mr. Norton and his team are looking at incentives to try and increase the availability of all different types of housing in Chatham-Kent. It's a global need, all different levels. Shelley and her team have been working with senior levels of government to try and secure additional funding to try and have affordable housing, certainly some of the things we have in our social housing stock. The third piece, which I think Councillor Latimer and Councillor Harrigan are raising today, is we need to look at additional investigation as to how we can promote secondary units or leveraging some of the existing space in our community to provide additional housing or homes for people. So that third piece is what I'm taking out of this current motion. And so whether there's one report or three, I think we're going to come back to you in time for the budget deliberations on how we can investigate this third issue, but there'll be all three of the reports coming forward in time for Council's consideration for budget.
So it doesn't throw a spanner in the works?
I think April spoke to it well. This is something that deserves a deeper dive. And so the whole issue of the secondary suites and how we could actually expand opportunities for people to live in some of those, the current home stock that we have right now, that requires further investigation. And that's what I believe is the intent of the motion.
Okay, we make things political all the time. I can support that. Okay.
Councillor Crew.
Mine was simply around timing. The intent is that this and your report will be backed by budget.
Through you, Mayor Caniff, I can only speak for our piece of it. So certainly we, Shelley has worked very hard with the consultant in terms of looking at policy changes and some specific incentives for affordable housing. We have to pair that up, and I can let John speak to that side of it, of incentives for all housing. And then this new added piece, I don't see, I think we can make that deadline in terms of making sure council has information for budget.
Okay, and just housing is a priority that's been set by the Age Friendly Committee as well, so we'll be supporting any policies around that.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Worship. I'm good.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put this to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Councillor Crew, you had an add-on in here?
Yes, I made a mistake, mixed up the numbers. My conflict is with this report 15B. I work for Family Service Kent.
Thank you.
Not 19.
Item 15B, Community Transportation Bylaw, grant bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor.
I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
And I'll second, thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor C. McGregor. Councillor C. McGregor. Sorry. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 16, Finance, Budget, and Information Technology Services.
Item 16A, 2020 interim tax levy, due dates, and borrowing bylaws.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Bondi.
I'll second, thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, put it to vote.
Councillor Bondi. Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 17, Corporate Services.
17A, council meetings in all wards.
Councillor Sakatchi.
I'd be happy to move the recommendation.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Happy to second. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. Just a question around accessibility and live streaming. At the Tilbury meeting, which had a great turnout by the community, and I think people appreciated us moving the council meetings to be more local so that people who maybe couldn't drive or didn't want to travel so far to attend council could attend. But I believe it was because of the Wi-Fi signal the meeting was not able to be live streamed over YouTube. So by being more accessible to some, we actually reduced accessibility to others. So I'm just wondering how we can potentially address that in future. Maybe it involves being a bit more prepared with the Wi-Fi signals or working to make sure that we can live stream.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, definitely when we search for the locations in all of the wards, we will definitely look at that and engage our IT department in order to make that as accessible for all.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'll support this because there seems to be support from the public for this, but what I'm kind of taking from the feedback summary here that we have, it appears as though people would maybe want something that doesn't exist, which would be something in the middle of a town hall and a council meeting. Because from the comments coming back, it appears as though the people that are in attendance are primarily from that ward, which makes sense, which is why we're doing it. But the feeling you get is that people would like to address council, which of course they can't, because if there's not something on the agenda, then they can't speak to it. And of course, we don't gear the agenda towards the ward that we're in. So just a friendly suggestion, and I don't know that it may not even be possible with rules of council, as Judy would be able to tell us, but if maybe there would be a way that we could allow a short list, well, that's impossible too, but of people to maybe address council to bring their ward concerns while in that ward, which again, I don't know if that's possible because you can't make a deputation unless something's on the agenda, and we don't want to skew the agenda towards being, focusing on certain wards. But just a suggestion, because again, the feedback, a lot of people, and I know the people that came in to see me said, oh, that's great. I'm from Tilbury, and when I'm there, I'm going to talk to council. I said, oh, no, you're not. You can't. So if there's a way, that we can maybe, I don't know if it'd be bending the rules, but just give people, an ability to, speak to council, not 400 people, obviously, we don't want to be there only, but you see what I'm trying to get at, that there could be more public engagement, again, somewhere in the middle of a council meeting. And I like the idea of the town hall. I think that's more effective, but here we are. That's not the recommendation, but Judy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, there are some procedural guidelines that would prevent us from doing that particular thing. But we can definitely brainstorm some opportunities. The town hall, I know Ward 2 councillors are doing that, and that allows people to come forward, but it is the 3 councillors and perhaps the mayor that are attending, and they don't have the ear of all 18. We have thought about, the first hour as local concerns and so on, but then how do you cut it off and allow some people to speak and others? So we do have some time before the spring one. We could maybe brainstorm on how we can have that opportunity. Even if we had started it an hour before council, it's still, once we have quorum and once we have council there, it's a council meeting. So let us brainstorm and see what we can do and go from there.
Great, thanks. I know it's a difficult ask, but when you read this feedback, I think it would probably increase our participation as well. So thank you very much.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Worship. I read the comments in great detail, and I can't understand why the recommendation is what it is. The comments are not in favor of it. The comments are in favor of council holding meetings in other wards. But then when you drill down, what most people are saying is exactly what I just heard there, is what they really want is an opportunity to speak to council. And that is called a town hall meeting. Even when you say, what would you like to change? It's all about opportunities to speak and receiving input from local people. And then when you get to please explain why you'd prefer a community meeting or a council. The only time they say that they want a council meeting, the majority is in the first question. And if the question was asked, should the council continue to hold meetings in other wards, the answer should be yes. But what type of meetings? So the question isn't really asked the way that, you can dictate the response you're going to get from the question you ask, as we all know. So when they're then asked, do you prefer a community meeting format to a traditional council meeting, 70% say yes. And that should be the answer. That should be what the recommendation is, because that's what the answer is from the people. And then when you drill down, sure enough, what they really want is town hall meetings. They don't. I mean, you can't say you can't jerry-rig these things so that all of a sudden you're going to have a half an hour of community meeting unless you're going to do the same thing here at the other meetings. I mean, you can't discriminate and say, okay, we're going to have, when we go out to Wallaceburg, we're going to have a half an hour of public chit-chat before, and you're not going to have that here, where there is far more than 41% of the population in the planning area that's served by this area. So I don't get the report. I mean, it isn't based on the feedback that when you drill down in Appendix A. I really can't understand it. I kept reading it and said, how does the recommendation match with the appendix? And the answer is, it doesn't. The only place that it does is in the first question. And I agree 100%. Council should be holding meetings in other wards. And that makes sense. But the question is, should they be council meetings or should they be town hall meetings? Town hall meetings allow people to participate. Council meetings don't, and they shouldn't. That's exactly what a council meeting is supposed to do, is deal with agenda items. So I totally support council holding meetings in other wards on a regular basis over the year, but not council meetings. That's not what the people really want. Even when you ask them, would you attend a council meeting in another community? The answer is no. No, but I'd like to come to my town hall and express my concerns about what's going on in my community. And I think people should be allowed the opportunity to do that. But that's not a council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are valid points.
I think so.
The recommendation that was brought forward by administration was simply to finish out the term so that each ward would have the experience that Chatham Ward 6 and then Ward 1 has had. So it would be 4 more meetings in the other 4 wards to finish off the experiment of being in all wards.
Well, Ward 6 hasn't had, I mean, this isn't Ward 6. This is where County Council met and where it just happens to be in the geographic center of Chatham-Kent. But I guess then you'd have to have ward meetings, town hall meetings here too. And I don't know. That's what your report says. The recommendation says different than what Appendix A says, and that's my problem. And I think it just doesn't. It's not logical, and I tend to try to be logical.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Are we planning to continue to collect feedback if these meetings do occur in other locations?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As to the questions that were asked in the appendix, yes, we can clarify the questions, but yes, it would be our intent to continue asking throughout the communities.
Perfect. And just maybe to Councillor Bondi's point and Councillor Solomon, there is some opportunity outside of regular council for individuals to have that open house or town hall opportunity, and that's through the budget open houses. So I know if anyone's attended any of those, the budget certainly is everything that we do as a municipality. So the feedback at those is pretty wide ranging. I know last year in Tilbury we had an extended amount of time discussed drainage. So I mean, there's an opportunity there in a much less formal format, and maybe we have to continue to look at ways to push that information out there so people know they have that opportunity.
Councillor Latimer.
All my concerns have already been voiced.
Councillor C. McGregor.
I'm just curious, as we talk about allowing people to be able to talk, and we allow delegations at any point in time for anything that's on the agenda at any of our meetings. Wouldn't it be as simple as including a community report within the agenda? Then if somebody wants to ask questions of council regarding issues in, say, if it's Wallaceburg next, and there was a community report on Wallaceburg, then that gives them that opportunity to be able to get up and ask questions regarding Wallaceburg. And then the same thing for each of the other communities. It's a great idea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was one of the items that we had brainstormed previously, so we've got number 1 on our list for brainstorming.
I'd just like to add something to that. If we could put one question in for the remaining ones, is it important for you to have all of council out here in your ward, or is it just your ward members and your mayor? Like what's happening now is that wherever it is, the ward councillors will go out, and I can join when I can, but no other ward councillors are coming from other wards to hear the concerns of those individuals. So how do we share that thing? Do the people want to see all the councillors out in their ward, given that we're all making decisions for all wards here? And that to me is the importance of doing that at least once, to get out to those locations. So that's the piece there. I think maybe some of them are answering, yeah, I want to have these question and answer periods, but that would, to me, would tell if everybody says, no, I don't care if any of the other councillors come, I just want to talk to my ward councillors, then I would say, well, yes, you're right, we shouldn't be doing this, and let's move on. But I think that's the piece we need that in there. Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor McGrail, Councillor Pinsnell. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Item 17B, appointment of Integrity Commissioner and closed meeting investigator.
Can I say one thing on this report? Sorry, I just got to find it here. Council, with regards to this report, I needed to add a fourth recommendation, and it would state, and you'll see it up there on the screen, this appointment is subject to the parties entering into a written agreement acceptable to legal services. The effective date of the appointment shall be on the date listed in the agreement. So we just need to pass that agreement back and forth for signing.
Councillor Crew.
I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Oche.
I'll second that.
Questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Item 17C, amendment to business licensing bylaw, Schedule B, adult entertainment parlor.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Crew.
I'll second it.
Any questions? Councillor Harrigan.
Hi, just a quick question to staff around what it is that prompted this particular review of a bylaw, and if there are going to be other reviews of bylaws pertaining to other sectors. Is this part of the red tape reduction, or is this something different?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was viewed at, there are currently 3 that are permitted, and the one was at the location on Queen Street where it's now a parking lot for Integris, and the other location was in Wallaceburg where the building has been demolished. So we were simply cleaning up the bylaw to be to the one that currently exists, and it was part of cleaning up the process, part of red tape, and we'll continue to always look at our bylaws and amend as necessary.
And just in follow-up, do we have similar bylaws for other types of businesses or sectors that list the number of establishments across the municipality?
I'm not aware of any from my business license perspective, like number of restaurants or that kind of stuff, but...
Or like bars that serve alcohol, other...
Mr. Mayor, not typically, but there are establishments like this that most municipalities try to limit the numbers. Once a business is in existence, you can't simply just revoke their license. You can't also get rid of, there's also, zoning issues that arise. So when a business disappears, it's an opportunity for council to consider how many of that type of business they wish in their community. We currently have 3 licenses available. We only have 1 used. We thought it was a good time to come forward and amend that from 3 to 1, but it's certainly council's decision how many of these types of businesses you'd like in the community. You can set the number.
No, thank you. That's all. It's just interesting around how regulation around businesses that may have what I will call ethics involved in them seems to go unquestioned, but then other business regulations we put forward, we would really comment if it's government's role to put those regulations in. So I just thought I would ask the questions.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. If the if the current existing licensee were to close and we voted to eliminate the number down to 0, or perhaps say it doesn't close, would somebody have the ability to apply for the license again? Or does, and then would that come to council, or is that is it a zoning? I guess what I'm saying is, if 4 of these adult entertainment establishments wanted to establish themselves in Chatham-Kent in the next 4 years, how do we control that? Because we're reducing the number of licenses from 3 to 1 tonight if this passes. So does that close the door on this, or can businesses come forward and make an application for 5 new ones?
Mr. Mayor, so no, if you reduce it from 3 to 1 and another business came forward and wished to apply for a second license, we would tell them that there's only 1 license permitted and we're not allowing more licenses. I can give you an example. Taxis. Most municipalities only issue so many taxi licenses. And if you try to apply for a license beyond the number permitted, then they're just not issued. So the same here. We just wouldn't issue more licenses. You're asking if we reduce it to 0. We're not permitted at law to reduce it. We have to allow legal businesses to operate in our community. Council's prerogative is to control the number of those businesses through the number of by issuing licenses. I guess I'll put it that way. So I don't think we could legally go down to 0.
Oh, that was actually the base of the question. So 1 will exist. Even if it's not operational, there could be a vacant license. And then, okay, great, thanks.
Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor McGrail.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a quick question. Does this make the one that remains more valuable now?
Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't want to speculate on what the value of licenses is in the marketplace.
I've made my point. Thank you.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Couldn't a person then, couldn't we just change the bylaw again as we're doing now if a second person or second business came forward and said they wanted to establish an adult industry entertainment venue? Could we not, like you're saying no, you're going to say hard no to them, but in reality, they could approach a councillor and we could change the bylaw again. Could we not?
Mr. Mayor, yes, you can, but businesses do operate, as Councillor Thompson noted, they operate based on, they operate their businesses based on whether council's made the decision to set a number of licenses within a particular community. An example, again, is taxis. So if a taxi company knows that there's only 40 taxi licenses available in the community and they own all 40 of them, they probably can act, they try to operate their business accordingly, and I think it's not helpful for council to be constantly resetting the number, in other words. If you suddenly issued another 100 taxi licenses, that changes the economics. So typically that's not what municipalities do. I think most municipalities on this particular type of business have been trying to reduce the number of those businesses. So, you can go the other direction if you want. It's not for me to say, but we're bringing forward what is becoming normative across Ontario, which is to reduce the number of businesses, this type of business. And the opportunities has arisen since these licenses are currently vacant.
Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. And just one comment in response to that is oftentimes I think there's good intent for these types of businesses where a municipality or community might say, well, let's reduce it. Let's regulate it so that there can only be one. In actuality, what that can often lead to is the result of a unlicensed business taking place in a unregulated area. And then there's less ability for open conversation and control and potentially safety of people who are working in adult entertainment establishments. And I think sometimes as council, well, it's very tempting for us to do things like reduce these types of licenses unless you really look at all of the different intersectionalities that come with these conversations. Then you may be doing a disservice to some of the people who are part of the adult entertainment industry or other marginal businesses.
Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, my question is, if we left all 3 licenses in place, do we, as a council, not have control of where these establishments are set up?
Mr. Mayor, the short answer is yes and no, and the long answer is an answer I'd prefer to give in closed session. We're heading down a path that I really think there's the warning bell. Mr. Mayor, I just think this is a discussion to have in closed session. We can either do that tonight or at the next council meeting. I'm sorry.
No, it's not a problem. My thing is free enterprise. It's like with every business, and fundamentally that's what I have a problem with, is reducing the number of licenses, whether you think the business is appropriate or not in the community. I don't know. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. To John, please. John, the licenses are not to a building, they're actually to a property, an address, are they not?
Mr. Mayor, so there's two things required. One is a business needs a license. Secondly, they have to address through planning, they have to address zoning. So they have to be zoned to run an adult entertainment parlor at the location they're at. Does that answer the question?
Like for instance, if Integris decided to open one, they could open one because they have the parking, they have the license to that
So
address?
those are some examples, Mr. Mayor, that I think we should talk about in closed session.
Well, I'm sure Integris will never do that, but I'm just saying, because two of them are to places that are parking lots and where hopefully someday a housing will go up to in Wallaceburg. But the second thing would be, did we not minimize, maybe it didn't go through, I can't remember. I remember Councillor B. McGregor bringing up the loans place, and I thought we had put a limit of 6 on that. So this is the same thing basically as far as I'm concerned, putting a limit on licenses.
That's right, Mr. Mayor. That's another example. I think the payday cash establishments, we've limited the number of those as well. That's right.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Meredith, my computer froze. Can you just put it up, please? Motion passes 9-8.
Item 17D, amending contractual appointment bylaw.
Councillor B. McGregor.
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Latimer.
I'll second that.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 18, community development.
Item 18A, Climate Change Action Plan Terms of Reference. We have a presentation by Gabriel Clark.
All right. Good evening, Your Mayor, Your Worship, members of Council, and the general public. My name is Gabriel Clark, and I'm here to present or to support the report to Council that is part of your agenda package for the terms of reference for the Climate Change Action Plan. So this slide, I'll begin with this slide. It outlines administration's proposed approach to fulfilling the climate emergency declaration that was approved by Council in July of 2019, and it forms the basis of the November 4th information report to Council that we presented a few weeks ago. So action 1 of that report to Council included the information report that we brought forward on November 4th and this report to Council that I'm speaking to today. Action 2 involved the development of a climate change background report, which would include a climate analysis, both historical and future, using internationally accepted climate science, as well as an inventory and analysis of current and past mitigation and adaptation actions that the municipality would have undertaken. Action number 3 would be to develop and employ the interim, what we're calling the interim climate change lens to assess the 2020 budget. And that time frame is this winter and beginning of next year. So we are talking about the Climate Change Action Plan, and I just want to start by talking about the various components of a Climate Change Action Plan. So when we're looking at addressing climate change at the municipal level, there's really 2 sets of actions that we can do. We can address the source of climate change on the one hand, or we can address the impacts. When we're addressing the source, i.e. the production of greenhouse gas emissions, we're talking about climate mitigation. So if you look on this side, on the left-hand side, or on this slide, on the left-hand side of that slide, those boxes refer to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. On the right-hand side, we'd be talking about addressing the impacts. And what we mean by this is really how do we adapt and become more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And so think about on the adaptation side of things, how do we manage heat, how do we manage precipitation, and how do we manage extreme weather events as a community so we may become more resilient to those impacts. This Climate Change Action Plan is also going to have a dual focus, and I need to clarify this at the beginning because I'm going to be using this word corporate and community, and I want to make sure that everybody understands what I'm referring to within the context of this presentation. So when I'm talking about the corporate energy use and corporate resiliency, I'm talking about resiliency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions for the municipal corporation. So the municipality of Chatham-Kent, the things that we do in the community for our community stakeholders. When I'm talking about the community side of the plan, I'm talking about our businesses, our residents, and our community stakeholders. And so with that, as sort of a background or introduction, this slide, what it does is it tries to provide a visual representation of the various components of the Climate Change Action Plan as we've laid it out in the terms of reference. So on the mitigation side, or reducing greenhouse gas emission side of things, we'd be looking at corporate energy use. So the energy that the municipal corporation of Chatham-Kent uses to conduct its operations. We'd be also looking at community energy use. So the energy that our residents and our businesses use. And we'd also be looking within those 2 contexts from a renewable energy perspective. So can we responsibly increase the use and production of renewable energy in both for the corporation and for the community. On the adaptation side of things, so moving to the right of this slide, you'll notice shoreline resiliency. So I've got a very compressed image of the Lake Erie shoreline vulnerability assessment study that Peter Zuzek and Associates are undertaking. That project is well underway and it's scheduled to wrap up around March of 2020. I just wanted to contextualize where that particular project fits within the larger climate change action plan. On the adaptation side of things as well, we'd be looking at how do we increase corporate resiliency to climate change, again, for the municipal corporation. And then on the adaptation side of things as well, we'd be looking at how do we increase community resiliency to climate change. Again, thinking about in general terms, how do we manage heat, how do we manage precipitation, and how do we manage extreme weather events. Now, our partners, the reason that I have that graphic in the bottom right there, it's an image of the title page of the Health Impacts of Climate Change report that was completed by our partners at CK Public Health. And basically, what it does is, in a nutshell, is it looks at how climate change is projected to impact our most vulnerable populations. So that report, very insightful, very informative, and really does form, I think, a solid basis for us moving forward in terms of developing actions to address those priority climate challenges facing various segments of our community. I should also mention that there is a report that is later on your agenda. I believe it's item 19C, and it's going to be talking about the Partners for Climate Protection Program and the benefits. I believe there's actually a request in there to have the municipality join the Partners for Climate Protection Program. Without trying to steal my colleague's thunder, I just want to say that the Partners for Climate Protection Program is a mitigation planning framework, and by joining the program, one of the things that the municipality would gain is a number of instruments that they've developed to help municipalities go through the mitigation planning exercise. And one of the ones that I'm particularly excited about is the Community Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory tool that they've developed over the last 15 years. I had the pleasure of using one, a previous edition in Parkland County, which was Excel-based, and they've actually updated it quite a bit since then. All right, so moving on to the actual project framework as we've laid it out in the draft terms of reference. So starting on milestone one is really where we're setting up the conditions or the project framework. So we're doing things like today's presentation and report to council. We're outlining the terms of reference, the scope of the project, and what we basically what we propose to do for the next year and a half. Under that, and closely related to the terms of reference, is the engagement plan. And that will outline how we propose to engage the community and our corporate stakeholders. Again, and within this context, I'm speaking to or speaking about my partner departments throughout the organization. In addition to that, we'd be looking at establishing a climate change action team. So this is a corporate team that's going to be, that we're hoping to establish, that will have representation from each of the individual departments. So we'll be able to use that committee as a sounding board for the corporate mitigation and adaptation initiatives that we'll be exploring throughout this process. Under that, you'll see the stakeholder scan, and really what that is looking at the various civil organizations that are currently within Chatham-Kent, so we can do an inventory of them and understand who our key players are within the community, and basically inform the engagement strategy based on who is out there and who do we need to speak to and who would like to speak to us. Under project administration, the final task would be a policy review, and that's looking at basically the federal and the provincial policy regime as it pertains to climate change. And once that's out of the way, then I'll actually get into the climate change action planning process. On the mitigation side of things, so this is the side that looks at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, one of the things that we'll be doing is defining current mitigation status. And what that basically means is doing a scan and an analysis of what we've currently done on the mitigation side of things. Council may recall that in 2016, there was a community energy plan that was approved by Council. One of the things that we'll be doing as part of that task is doing an implementation review to understand how effective that plan has actually been in moving the needle on climate change. We will also be undertaking inventories. So these inventories would be done both for the municipal corporation and for the wider community. And what they would essentially provide us with is an understanding of our major sources of greenhouse gas emissions by fuel type and by sector. So we'll have a better understanding of where our opportunities are for reducing greenhouse gas emissions based on our operational requirements. And those of the community. And on the adaptation side of things, You'll notice the wording as under the mitigation bucket. We'd be looking at defining current adaptation status. Now, as of right now, Chatham-Kent does not have a climate change adaptation plan. That said, there are a number of initiatives that have been implemented over the years that have adaptation benefits, and we'd like to identify and highlight those so we can understand where we've gone on the adaptation side of things to date. Okay, just making sure I got all my notes covered off. So milestone 2. The goal under this milestone is to develop greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and to identify on the mitigation side of things, and on the adaptation to identify priority climate challenges. So if we start on the top left-hand corner of that slide, you'll see mitigation milestone 1. That box basically is trying to illustrate that we carry over the inventories from milestone 1 to this process. So we would have a baseline. The idea through the engagement and council workshop process is to develop a target. So you would have where we are today and where we would like to be. And then under milestone 3, we'll be filling in that gap with actions. On the adaptation side of things, one of the things that we're proposing to do is to complete a number of background reports to provide a, I would say, more sound empirical basis to identify priority climate challenges and opportunities facing the community and the corporation. So the background studies would involve a climate analysis. This is a historical climate analysis, so looking at what we've actually observed in Chatham-Kent's climate since 1951, thereabouts, all the way up until 2013. And then moving forward from 2013 to 2095, the climate analysis will employ basically a number of global climate models that have been developed to support the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The infrastructure assessment, what we've listed in the terms of reference, would be done using this protocol called the Public Infrastructure Engineering Vulnerability Committee Protocol, so PIEVC. It's a protocol that was developed by Engineers Canada, and we've used it in Halton Hills. It's extremely straightforward, and I would say one of the better frameworks for identifying vulnerabilities within infrastructure. So we're looking at, this would include buildings, culverts, roads, bridges. And basically what you're doing is you're looking at that piece of infrastructure from a climate perspective. So is it able to withstand X? Is it able to withstand Y? And if not, what needs to be done to upgrade that facility to make sure that it can in the future? The third and final background component that we're proposing as part of milestone 2 would be a natural heritage systems assessment. And what this mapping exercise would do, or would seek to achieve, is to identify areas within the municipality, environmental areas within the municipality, that are either particularly resilient or vulnerable to projected changes in climate. The reason that we'd like to integrate this into the Climate Change Action Plan is because it can do this background study, can provide the basis for informing our stewardship programs moving forward. Alternative land use services was mentioned earlier as an example. It can also help structure and inform our land use development patterns, for example. And so as part of milestone 2 on the adaptation side of things, like I said, the idea would be to identify priority challenges and opportunities, if they exist, facing the community. And what we would be doing is completing those background reports, synthesizing their findings, providing them to the public, and going through an engagement process and then a council workshop to identify priority challenges and opportunities facing the community. I also have that Health in a Changing Climate report, because that report provides us with a number of priority challenges, and I would say there's very few opportunities in that report, but it does provide us with a number of priority challenges from a health perspective that I would suggest would be important to look at and consider during the next milestone of this project. Okay. So in milestone 3, the goal is basically to develop the actions, to evaluate or to explore, to evaluate, to prioritize the actions that we're going to be including in the plan. And so on the mitigation side of things, from milestone 1, what we would have is we would have our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and then we would have our target. And as I mentioned, what the objective of this particular milestone is to fill in the gap between where we are today, where we'd like to be with actions that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those actions would be explored through a community engagement process. The findings would then be synthesized and provided to council in a second workshop. And out of that workshop, we would have our community and corporate our corporate and community greenhouse gas action plans. That's correct. On the adaptation side of things, we would come up with, or from milestone 2, we would carry over our priority climate challenges and a definition of community resilience. And basically what we would be doing here is essentially the same thing on the mitigation side of things. We'd be exploring actions in terms of their ability to partially or fully address the priority climate challenges facing the community that would have been identified in the previous milestone. And like as I mentioned previously, the ZUZEC study is there just to show the relationship between that particular study and this endeavor that we're proposing to undertake. So this slide provides council with a proposed timeline for the various tasks. You'll see the 3 milestones on the left-hand corner and each of the tasks that are listed in the terms of reference. I don't think I need to go through them in detail, but I can show you that I suppose I'll highlight under milestone 3, we're proposing to do a full 6 months of community engagement to identify those priority climate challenges and to develop those greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And then we're also proposing to do about another 6-month engagement process in milestone 3 to develop those actions. The project is scheduled to end in June of 2021. And this timeline provides a more detailed breakdown of the proposed engagement activities. I should mention that the engagement plan is still under development right now, but we are at this point exploring the possibility of including introductory meetings with some key stakeholder groups, the use of our engagement platform, Let's Talk Chatham-Kent, a number of social media campaigns, industry meetings with our key economic sectors, community conversations, stakeholder workshops, youth engagement, pop-ups at existing events, and a potential art exhibition. Now, I put this slide here because in my short time in Chatham-Kent as the environmental planner, a number of questions have been posed to me about trees from residents, council, and staff. And I mean, I would suggest that we would likely run into this issue even if we didn't explicitly mention it tonight. The reason I say that is because trees are one of the most well-known instruments, for lack of a better term, for fighting climate change. On the mitigation side of things, we know, I would suggest most of us, if not all of us, know that trees sequester carbon, which removes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and would lower the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which is the goal of mitigation. On the adaptation side of things, though, there are a number of additional benefits that are, I would suggest, maybe less apparent, but just as valuable from a community standpoint. So on adaptation, I've got a couple of the benefits there, really focusing again on heat and precipitation. So heat in an urban settings, trees have been shown, and the evidence is actually increasing and becoming more and more compelling by the day, that the benefits that trees provide from a shade perspective and their contributions to reducing the urban heat island effect and the ability to lower facility or building-related heating and cooling loads, both in the winter and summertime, have been empirically demonstrated. On the precipitation side of things, there are a number of municipalities that are considering trees to be a municipal utility insofar as they provide a number of stormwater management benefits. They capture, they clean, and then gradually release stormwater, much like our engineering design or engineered design stormwater management facilities, but obviously to a lesser degree. So what we're proposing to do as part of the larger climate change action plan is to develop a vision for Chatham-Kent's tree canopy as part of Milestone 2. This will be a specific theme area during Milestone 2. And during Milestone 3, we're proposing to engage the community and our council to explore and assess the suitability of various tree management instruments in terms of their ability to achieve the vision, their cost, their resource requirements, etc. And whatever outcome is arrived at the end of that process would be integrated into the final climate change action plan. So with that, I will end my presentation, and if there are any questions, please send them my way.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thank you, Gabriel, for the presentation. It's all pretty high-level stuff, right, at this point, more kind of like where you are with your planning and strategic goals. So my question is, and I may have caught it, but I don't know if I did or not. If we're speaking to people and they ask us what are we going to specifically do about climate change, like what are practical changes that we're going to make in the municipality, is that what we can expect in June 2021 when you'll report back to council with recommendations that we either, I'm just guessing, things like reduce the fleet or perhaps move to electric cars and different HVAC systems, tangible things that, because this is kind of hard to explain to people that, well, it's not really that hard to explain. I guess we're just in a strategic forecasting mode. So would it be June 2021 that we would actually have practical solutions that the average guy can sort of understand?
Absolutely. That is the intent, is to have a finalized climate change action plan for council's approval in June of 2021. But
yeah, that's what I thought I saw up there, yeah.
Sorry, I'm missing the slide here, but what I would like to highlight from current slide, there we go, is that the process as it's outlined in the terms of reference would see us undertaking an engagement process to explore the various actions from I've got my lens somewhere, or I've got my evaluation criteria somewhere. So we'd be looking at, and I hope I put it in this copy, effectiveness, costs and resources, responsibilities, and implementation timeline. So those are really some of the key criteria that we'd be asking the community to look at when they're exploring various options. And that input would then be provided to council in that workshop, and council, as we've written in the terms of reference, would have the final call. So when we get to June, all of the actions that are contained in that action plan, you will have seen as a councillor prior to the presentation of the actual report.
Right, and that's when we'll see the actual
yes
actions that we could take.
Yes, absolutely.
Great, that does it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got one question at the beginning, and then I've got a couple more after that. I'm not a big fan of buzzwords, and I can never understand what lenses are, except for that maybe. What do you mean by viewing this through an environmental lens? Like, what does that expression lens, environmental lens, mean to you?
Well, that's a great question. I believe that what we'll be doing is looking at this through a community sustainability lens.
Another lens.
Which is, and okay, so where do we start? What I would suggest is that part of this exercise, and really the thrust of engagement one, is looking at or gaining information from the public in terms of where do we balance economy with our environment, with our social and our cultural priorities. And from that, developing an action plan that responds to those values.
That's a good answer. So rather than buzzwords, that makes sense to me. Listening to that is helpful. By the way, before I start further, I thought your presentation was excellent. I thought not only your oral presentation, but your slides made things fairly easy to understand from a high level perspective. And so I particularly like the mitigation side of your chart. I like the red side, oddly enough, more than the adaptation, because one seemed to me that it was a reduction in costs, and the other seemed to me that it probably should have been red because it's a cost. So I look at things through a financial lens, I guess, is what, if I'm going to use the same buzzwords. I think we should focus on that, the corporate reductions in particular at the outset, thereby showing leadership rather than creating. My biggest fear is that we create red tape for business.
Yes.
And add costs. I don't think that's the action that needs to be taken by a municipal council.
Absolutely.
It's bad enough when it occurs in Ottawa, but I don't think we need to do that. They can muck things up. We don't need to do that. But I think it's great that from this it appears that you have broken those things out into corporate. So really, what I'm hoping that means is that we'll walk the talk rather than just talk about it first. And by that I thought the mitigation deals with certain things that I spoke about when you were here last time, reducing our carbon footprint. So one of the more specific things I wanted to ask you was, you have an inventory that you referred to about vulnerable sites, environmentally vulnerable sites, and I thought, there's a prime opportunity for somebody to do an inventory of all the brownfield sites that are in Chatham-Kent and convert those brownfield sites into greenfield sites and I'm glad you got to trees, because that's a fantastic opportunity to do that, and at the same time probably even incorporate other energy sources like solar panels on those same sites. But those are actions that people can actually see and know that it's one thing to talk about this stuff, and sometimes it becomes the flavor of the month, but when people actually see things out there, and they say, look, they're showing leadership and actually getting something done. So I know that's probably drilled down too far already, but the other concern I have, in addition to creating red tape, is we really ought not be in the global climate business. I don't think that we can do certain things in 100,000 population and maybe do some really good things, but if we try to stretch ourselves, we're not going to solve the global climate crisis. They shut down schools in Delhi just because the air is so thick. We're not going to change that in Chatham-Kent. I just hope we focus and really use something positive here in Chatham-Kent. The other is that, I saw one of the things that gave me a bit concerned was the shoreline aspect. I don't think we can control the Great Lakes in Chatham-Kent. The last person who tried to hold back water was Moses, and he could only do it for a limited period of time, apparently. And I don't think that we have the ability to do that. We don't have, through a financial lens, we don't have the financial ability to do it. We did some effective work in Holland, but we can't afford that stuff. So those are all the comments I have. I'm looking forward to seeing some real practical things come out of it, and I hope this community leads by reducing its carbon footprint in the numerous buildings we have. Maybe ultimately it's conversion of some fleets to natural gas, which is more environmentally friendly than gasoline. Maybe it's electric, but then you got to remember where electricity is produced. So it's not hydro, as we keep calling it in Ontario. It's electricity. So anyway, thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say, first off, thank you so much for the presentation this evening. It was certainly a meticulous and exhaustive dive into the report, and your passion and knowledge on the subject is clearly first rate. I did want to ask, are we biting off more than you can chew? Some of the timelines seem pretty aggressive.
That's a great question, Councillor Thompson. We've looked at, this is personally my third time going through this process. I can say that I've learned some things over the few years that I've done this. I can say that I'm confident, like in a nutshell, I can say that I'm confident with this timeline. It is both achievable and aggressive. I would look at, like I had it in here, I didn't think it was important to mention at the time. But I looked at Peel Region just recently produced a climate adaptation plan only. Their process spanned from 2017 to 2019. In Durham, their adaptation plan spanned 4 years. So I understand your concern. I would say that this particular project is a meaningful step, but it is a step in a long journey that we'll be taking over the next several decades. It took us a long time to get here from a climate change perspective. It's going to take us a long time to get out. And as has been mentioned, we're going to have to balance growing this community, the environment, and our resources. And we're going to have to make intelligent choices based on the feedback that we receive from the community.
That actually makes me really comfortable to hear you say that it's going to take time and that you've done this 3 times before. So what are some of the hiccups and some of the speed bumps you've seen over the past 3 opportunities that maybe we can avoid this time around?
The primary pitfall, or how did you count? Or the primary
speed bump.
The primary mistake that I've learned from is engagement. Engagement is going to be absolutely 100% required to get this through. A successful engagement process will lead to a successful implementation.
And this is fun because you took my next question, and when you reference engagement, I noticed you put it in your report 59 times in 33 pages. And for my aspect, engagement is incredibly important. The other thing I was going to ask was we're not locking into anything tonight, obviously. Like you said, this is a long-term plan, and without engagement, it won't go anywhere, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. The only other thing, I was going to save it, but I did want to add, because Councillor Solomon brought it up in regards to lenses and mitigation and adaptation. And clearly, we're not in the global climate business. I utterly agree, especially not on the mitigation side, but I think most definitely on the adaptation side, we are. We have to deal with those issues. I was going to save my little story for the next report, but I think it works now. I had a chance to speak at AMO a couple weeks back in regards to climate change, and I just wanted to share this story. I don't know if you're a history fan or not. Actually, I am, and I don't understand lenses either, truth be told. But I understand stories. I think it's the line of work I'm in. So, and bear with me, it's only going to take a minute. Back in the 1850s, London, England was dealing with a cholera epidemic. It would claim the lives of 10,000 people. The reason was because there was an open sewer system that dumped all the crap into the Thames. And to fix it, it fell to a guy by the name of Joseph Bazalgette, who is a personal superhero of mine. So he went to work planning out the sewer network. So he took the densest population in the town of London at the time, London, England, calculated how much sewage that one person could possibly create, and he came up with the diameter of the pipe he needed. And then what he did is he looked at it, and he said, and I don't know how apocryphal it is, but he said, screw it, we're only going to do this once, so he doubled it. And if you remember your high school math, when you double the size of a pipe, you actually quadruple the flow, but there you go, even better. So what ends up happening is, but you don't double the cost of the project, right? Right. So because of that, they've had capacity for 160 years in London, England, despite the fact they never even allowed for great big apartment buildings, towers or the like, and they still have that capacity, whereas they would have run out in about 100 years. So when you talk about lenses, you can view that through a public health lens. Was that a public health issue? And the answer is yes. And was it a growth and development issue? You look at it through that lens. It's a yes. A quality of life issue, quality of life lens. Same thing, economic or environmental. And the answer is it's all those lenses because it's all the same issue. And we're dealing with that same issue today on climate change. So those are the lenses I look through it. And if we can add a climate change lens to it, I think that is, it behooves us to do so. So with that in mind, I appreciate you listening to my little story, and I would like to move the recommendations as presented.
Can we need a seconder for that? Just Councilor Latimer.
Thank you. I would love to second. thank you very much for this in-depth presentation. I echo Councillor Solomon and Councillor Thompson's accolades, but one thing I do want to talk to you about and make sure, particularly for the shoreline resiliency, are you taking into consideration the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, resources and expertise, and best practices they've already figured out dealing with Mother Nature on that shoreline for years? As I'm becoming more knowledgeable about their practices and their protocols and their program, I look forward to sharing that with you, Gabriel, because I think it needs to be part of that shoreline resiliency piece and the mitigation piece. And it really, very much, I think they need to be a stakeholder in that Partners for Climate Prevention program, protection program, sorry. I really want to make sure that we involve them. We're already involved with them as a municipality, and we do have to factor in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence cities, because we're all dealing with the same thing. And you're right. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and your timelines are daunting, but I think you can do it too. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan?
Thank you. So thank you for your presentation. I first want to say that I very much appreciate how detailed, the detailed attention that you gave towards community engagement, recognizing that this is one of the priorities of council this session. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to comment that aside from the formal groups, there's a lot of informal activism happening right now on social media. One example is the Zero Waste CK Facebook group, which I think some of the representatives or members of that group are here today to watch the conversation. So sometimes you don't have to do something formal or be a formal not-for-profit group. So I saw in that engagement strategy that you were looking to connect with as many residents as CK as possible, and I think that's fabulous. The question I have, Gabriel, may not be for you. It may be for Mr. Norton or potentially Mr. Shropshire. And it's around that balance between growth and environmentalism, or as some writers like George Monbiot in The Guardian have commented, consumerism and environmentalism. And I think right now, as a municipality, we're looking at both very important, but certainly very different arguable priorities. The one is around growth and how do we attract more economic investment, how do we grow our communities, grow our economy, and the other is how do we combat climate change. And a purely rhetorical question that I'm going to ask for us to consider is, how do we rewrite the rules of our economy and the value of growth so that we're rewarding growth that is investing in the future rather than taking away from it here in CK? And I think as a council, we're going to have some really important conversations as we think about landfills and infrastructure that's needed for growth, and what the scale is that balances that growth against things like, carbon footprints and emissions and mitigation strategies. So I'm not sure if there's any comment by senior leadership around that, but I'm hoping that you, Gabriel, and you, John, are talking to each other quite frequently about that, because we do want to grow cleanly here in Chatham-Kent.
Of course. And if I may, John? All right. No, absolutely. That's one of the things that that I keep top of mind in my roles, in my role as an environmental planner, is where this fits within the grand scheme of things from a community perspective. I am a big fan of leveraging the environment for the purposes of economic growth. And I'll give you an example that has been researched in the city of Winnipeg. So there's if you Google native plant solutions, they did a study in, I believe it was maybe 2013, it might be a little bit earlier. And what they did is they looked at the cost per square foot, or the value per square foot, of a house that was located adjacent to a naturalized stormwater facility versus one that was not. And what they found was that having actually invested in a naturalized stormwater management facility that looks like a wetland and has a little trail around it, commands a higher buying price for the house that's located next to that amenity versus one that's not. And what that translates into is higher assessment value and more tax dollars for the community. So those are the types of investments that I think are, or the type of actions that I think are particularly intriguing, because of the co-benefits that they provide. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at there.
Councillor,
maybe Mayor Caniff, just to jump in because I see Councillor Harrigan looking at me to see if I'm going to add anything. I agree with everything that Councillor Harrigan has said, and I think as Gabriel has outlined in this plan, he's going to do a lot of consultation. I think also on the growth, or on our economic growth strategies, we've got to do a lot of consultation, and that these things can work together, but in some measures maybe they are in conflict and some choices will have to be made, and that's what all that public consultation needs to be about. So 100% agree with all the comments we've heard tonight, and look forward to both this climate action plan being developed as well as our economic growth plan being developed, hand in hand.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, just one further question. Gabriel, you noted that there was a policy review that was going to take place. And I asked a question similar to this when we did the community development engagement session. So we have a number of policies that are kind of on the shelves that maybe need to be dusted off and looked at that this council or previous councils would have endorsed or committed to. Is the intent to look at them and ask the question, are these still relevant? And then how will it be presented back to council if we need to take what was suggested maybe 5 years ago or 6 years ago one step farther in light of new learnings that we have around how quickly climate change is taking place?
That's a great question, Councillor Harrigan. The answer is, at this point, what I've contemplated to date in the terms of reference is a review of provincial and federal policy and the implications that those would have on this particular project. I had not until now I haven't as of yet contemplated doing a municipal policy review. I'd have to see whether or not that is something that can be accommodated within the existing timelines. But conceivably, that is something that, could be integrated into this project.
Okay, yeah, I would suggest it's probably worth a look, especially around some of the conversations around tree cutting that happened a few years back. There was some good outcomes around collaborations and commitments that were going to take place in the municipality that may require revisiting. Thanks.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be short in the interest of time. There's lots going on, but I think Gabriel has given us tonight an overview of a framework that can be used to work through some of the challenges you've described, Councillor Harrigan. But I also want to point out that in no way are they always mutually exclusive. I don't think there's always a trade-off between growth and environmental protection. I mean, Chatham-Kent's a great example of the investments we've made in renewable energy, and we're the highest concentration of renewable energy in Canada. It's produced economic benefits to the community, and yet it's also resulted in cleaner air, and it's resulted in renewable power sources. So, that's just one example, and there's lots of them, but I think as the framework that we're talking about tonight gives council some tools so that we can look back and look at some balancing that's going to be required on occasion. But it's certainly not going to be a situation where it's going to be renewable. That adaptation and mitigation are often they can work in parallel. And the example you used about the stormwater management is a good one. So anyway, we'll be working with you and council to make sure that happens.
Councillor Scotchy?
My comments were mostly around the growth aspect as well, so they've been taken care of. But I just wanted to summarize one thing that you said near the end of your presentation, and just tell me if I'm accurate, just in case this comes relevant in January. Did you say basically that one of the most efficient and inexpensive ways of mitigating factor is planting trees?
Sorry, can you repeat?
So you did basically say one of the most effective ways to mitigate these issues is to plant trees. It's one of the most beneficial ways that you could do it is to plant trees near the end of your presentation?
Yes, through the mayor and to the councillor. What I was trying to allude to, I believe it's this slide right here, correct? What I may have misspoke, what I was trying to say is it's one of the most recognized and well-known. In terms of its cost benefit, there are potentially other vegetative sequestering options that actually might be more effective per acre in terms of sequestering carbon and the speed at which they sequester carbon. So there's a number of new crop species or crop types that have that are continually being explored for their carbon sequestration potential. Now, I read this a couple of years ago, but so please forgive me if this is inaccurate, but I believe that in Australia, one of the things that they were doing was looking at sequestration of industrial hemp per acre. And it seemed to be much quicker and or much more effective from a timescale perspective than planting deciduous trees, for example. But no, I wasn't saying it's one of the least expensive. That really remains to be determined in terms of all of our sources of greenhouse gas emissions and what we could potentially do to mitigate them. That's part of what we'd be doing as part of this whole climate change action plan, is looking at the cost benefit of various mitigation and adaptation actions. But I can suggest that from a, overall community benefit standpoint, the mitigation, the adaptation, the sense of place benefits, the aesthetics of urban trees, for example, lead me to suggest that we're probably going, like I said in the slide, we're probably going to have to come across, or we're going to come across trees as being, an instrument that we're going to be exploring as part of this project.
Much appreciated, and I can honestly say that you've been a major asset so far in your undertaking here, and it's very much appreciated, and I think it was a well-needed position, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hull?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just to echo some of the other councillors' comments tonight, thank you for the presentation and all the details, Gabriel. I know you were here in the council chambers back in September as well with our Community Development Advisory Committee, and I just wanted to touch on engagement, and I know the public has been engaged and invited out to hear all this information right from the get-go with this, so I really appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear that public engagement will carry throughout this whole process. Now, when you were speaking today, you did mention a six-month kind of process specifically for public engagement. Can you comment on that a little bit and tell me a little bit what that engagement will look like? I know you mentioned, Let's Talk Chatham-Kent using some of that online forum, but to maybe touch on what that engagement will exactly be and where that will be taking place.
Sure. So the engagement process, as we've outlined it to date, is listed on the screen there. So we actually have about 6 months for milestone 2, and then a 2-month break, a 2-month break in July and August of 2020, and then another 6 or 7 months of engagement to identify actions in the latter half of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. In terms of specific engagement instruments, we've got some of those listed there. So the Let's Talk Chatham-Kent is a very effective online engagement platform. There's a number of instruments like a poll tool, the survey tool, you can post documents and things like that. So we're proposing to use that throughout the entirety of the engagement process, so people can stay up to speed on, when the next in-person engagement is, for example. On the social media campaign, we're really looking at basically generating a community of curiosity around this project through the social media campaign, and really that's why we've got, sort of it as its own standalone thing. The industry meetings, we've got 4 sectors that are listed there. That may change, it may not, but basically what we're doing with those, or what we're proposing to do with those industry groups, is to meet with them individually as a sector and identify how they would like to be engaged in this process, and to develop an engagement process that meets their expectations and their needs. Same thing with our many community groups and associations. Community conversations are it's a process for engaging a smaller group of folks in a more in-depth conversation than can be had in a sort of a standard stakeholder workshop setting, which leads me to your standard workshops. We're going to be holding a number of standard workshops, where there's a presentation, a topic to deal with, or some questions that we're going to be posing the public with table discussions potentially, and a report back. A standard format for workshop. We're looking at potentially doing a number of those throughout the community. The Youth Solutions to Climate Change contest is still under development right now, but we're looking at potentially engaging various classrooms to see if we can challenge public and high school age students to develop solutions to climate change, not necessarily being restrained by technical feasibility. Or, what we really want to do there is support the creative thinking process, really. And then pop-ups at existing events. This is a valuable instrument because what you do is you meet people where they're already going. And so these are opportunities for short engagements. So a couple of key questions, maybe a card that I provide you that you fill out, that provides a link to a survey that you fill out at home online later on. And then the art exhibition, it may be an art exhibition, I'm not sure yet, but really one of the things that I'm considering to be a key linchpin of the engagement strategy is an arts and experience-based engagement process, so we can resonate or we can provide opportunities for engagement for those segments of the population that type of engagement form resonates with, and other forms of engagement for those other segments of the population.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Motion passes 17-0.
Item 18B, Ontario Heritage Act Designation Bylaws, 8800 Talbot Trail, Community of Harwich, and 9388 Cedar Hedge Line, Community of Chatham Township.
Okay, Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Bondy.
I'll second. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Pinsino. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Number 19, Infrastructure and Engineering Services.
Item 19A, Connecting Links Program Application, Grand Ave East Rehabilitation, Community of Chatham.
Councillor B. McGregor.
I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Latimer.
I'll second that.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 19B, Blenheim Landfill Liaison Committee Appointment.
Councillor Scotchy.
I'd be happy to move the recommendations, Your Worship.
Councillor Thompson.
Happy to second them.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 19C, Partners in Climate Protection Program Membership.
Councillor B. McGregor.
I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Latimer.
I'll second that.
Any questions? Councillor Crew.
Should we appoint a councillor? Should we appoint a councillor now, or can I make that motion?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
I'd like to move that Councillor Thompson represent us there.
Can I get a seconder to that motion? Councillor Pinsino. Any questions related to that amendment? We'll put it to vote then.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Number 19D, motion by Councillor Sakachi regarding upgrading of on-street parking, John Street West, Blenheim.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whereas the Talbot's Trail Place, Blenheim Rotary Park is one of the nicest attributes in the community of Blenheim, and where it is one of the large attraction areas for thousands of guests to attend free summer concerts. And whereas the park was constructed by private money and donations, and whereas there are continuous drainage issues within the area, And whereas the gravel caused accessibility concerns for residents that require personal assistance devices, and whereas John Street West has been previously identified for improvements in the near future, be it resolved that administration include as part of the 2020 municipal capital budget plan the upgrading of existing gravel on-street parking along John Street West from Chatham Street to Marlborough Street. Upgrading is to include all costs associated with drainage improvements, hard surfacing, line painting, and curb gutter.
Seconded by Councillor Latimer. Any questions? Councillor B. McGregor.
Yeah, just for clarity, is this already on a capital budgets list, or are we trying to vote to move it up the list, or is this a new addition to that list?
So Chris maybe can speak to this a little bit. So my intent is not to accelerate anything, not to bypass or jump ahead. I'll kind of go into the details, but if there has to be amendment to my motion is basically indicating when we go by that area to repair the road that is in disarray, that we just fix the on-street parking. I'll kind of get into that a little bit, but Chris can table that.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So the John Street, to upgrade to John Street on-street parking there will be put onto the capital plan for 2020, subject to council deliberation. Currently the John Street fronting that parking, as well as Chatham Street, is being identified as a priority to the hot mix contract for 2020 in accordance with our condition assessment ratings for both those road sections. Of course, that will be subject to budget and council deliberations there next year for the hot mix contract. But the road condition of John Street as well as Chatham Street is critical, and again, in accordance with the condition ratings that we do have, it will be a top contender for next year's contract. So that's just something that council will have to then take into consideration come budget deliberation for the capital plan for providing additional funding and support for this particular project to go with that, if that makes sense.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to
Actually,
vote.
Mayor, I just want to elaborate on that a little bit. Sorry if that's okay with you,
Certainly.
sir. I just wanted to kind of, for people that aren't familiar with the area, so basically in 2009, this was basically derelict property. It was vacated land. It needed remediation. The Ridge Landfill Community Trust, with encouragement from the Blenheim Beautification Committee and Rotary Club, purchased a block that bounded that section. And really that, at the time, the area was a large eyesore. They've basically put in excess of $3 million of fundraising money into this park. And you can see how beautiful it is. This isn't something that the municipality had to take on. Currently, they give them around $30,000 a year. That's it to operate this park. All the rest is by donations. The summer concert series, where I know Mayor Caniff has the opportunity to come out, is packed. It's all done. Free events. Everything is basically free there. And $17,000 or $13,000 is got right back into taxes. So basically, it costs us $17,000 to operate the park. I think, anyways. I don't know if Gord, if I'm saying anything too inaccurate. So basically, they employ some students in the summertime. All this is from a cost perspective. It just makes sense. So we all talk about common sense, making common sense decisions. So when we're fixing the road abutting this park, it just makes more sense to fix this area. Mr. Tiber, if you don't mind me asking, this section here doesn't fall under the parking lot bylaw, so we're not making this like a one-off, because this is not actually technically a parking lot. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So in accordance with our parking lot bylaw that we have in place, or parking lot policy that we have, upgrade policy that we have in place, it's been established back in 2001. It does identify municipally owned parking lots that fall under that program, not on-street parking. So this therefore does not kind of fall under that category. Correct.
Do you think this would be the most effective and efficient way to do that work when we're going past, instead of like locating a company there at a different time, or is it be most effective and initiative to do while we're doing that work?
So upgrading the on-street parking to a hard surface will greatly improve, of course, the road as well, the abutting road. There's an opportunity, obviously, with the adjacent gravel to address some of the drainage concerns that are happening that will not only impact the parking, but also impact the road. The prime opportunity to kind of combine the work from a cost standpoint and having the contractor there on site would be at the same time, of course, as doing the road. The project can be completed at a later time, but there will be a little bit more of an incremental cost as a result of it being a standalone contract rather than partnered up with an existing contract.
Okay, and the last point I just wanted to make is where this really came to light to me is one of the last concert series that I was watching there. We had a large rain, and I seen a lady trying to get her son out of a van with that had major accessibility issues. And this lady was basically dragging this large geriatric wheelchair through the gravel and some flooding. So I just thought the community has did so much for this park. I think that the least that we could do is just improve the on-street parking. Since it is our property, it belongs to us, and I just think it would be beneficial because this is a major attribute in our municipality and in South Kent. So I'm looking for everyone's support on this. And like I said, last comment, I'm not trying to bypass anybody else's roads in their area. If this is deferred to the 2022, I would just ask that this move with it. So I'm not trying to bypass anybody else's roads or trying to make this issue any more prevalent than anybody else's. So.
Okay, seeing no other questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks. No questions. I just wanted to echo Councillor Sakachi's comments in regards to this. Every South Kent councillor actually has been working on this since at least the park went in. I went back through my notes and I was speaking to Mr. Sula, who was the predecessor to Mr. T-Bear back in 2017 in regards to it. I think what people need to understand is what Councillor Sakachi was saying. We don't want to jump the queue, not by any stretch of the imagination. The parking lot, on-street parking lot, is technically municipal property anyway. It's within the road allowance there. So I think it is something that needs to be done to alleviate some of the accessibility issues, some of the drainage issues as well. And again, not jumping the queue, not the least bit interested in doing any of that. Just what we're saying is when John Street is done, please extend it out to that. I wish there was a good picture of it because it would really show you what you're trying to understand. Just extend that out to allow people to make it more accessible to access the park. So I think I've done enough damage. Thanks.
Councillor Pinsno.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Chris. So did you tell us that this is already on your radar to do it?
Thank you, Mayor Knapp. Sorry.
In your speech earlier, did you say you're already looking at the prospect of doing this?
So to address the motion, we will be making sure that the upgrading of the current on-street gravel parking lot is included in the 2020 capital plan, subject to council deliberations. That will be coming forward in the new year, part of the budget process. So, now, John Street, the upgrading of John Street, as of right now, is being identified as a priority road to be addressed under our 2020 hot mix contract, but that is still being finalized and will be subject to final budget and council approval.
Okay, so you're going to upgrade the gravel, but this here is asking for it to be paved. Is that correct?
No, so the on-street parking is currently gravel. John Street is an asphalt road that's just in poor condition that needs to be upgraded and resurfaced. So the request for capital is to actually upgrade the gravel parking lot to a hard surface. So that will include, as Councillor Scotchy had identified, proper curb, gutter, drainage, and an asphalt surface to the on-street parking.
So this is a parking lot, not just what's alongside the road.
It is municipally. It's within the municipal right of way. It is on-street parking, but it's obviously serving as a parking lot for this particular development.
I guess the only problem I got with it is that everybody has one of them in their community. That's all.
Thank you, Mary Caniff.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mary Caniff. Chris, what is the cost? Because that's like a big factor in this for me is the cost of this this upgrade. And then my second question is that when you replace John Street, what were you using to replace it? Was a hot and ready mix? Is that what you said? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Kaniff. So, answer the first question. The cost is still being determined, and that will be provided in the 2020 capital plan. to upgrade the on-street parking. The hot mix contract is just our asphalt resurfacing, annual asphalt resurfacing contract for the municipality.
Okay, I want to touch on that. So hot mix resurfacing, I've been listening in that committee, is we're taking existing asphalt and putting it through again and relaying it? Is that the one we're using?
No.
Or is this new asphalt coming in?
So you're referring to one of the innovative technologies that we will be exploring for implementation next year. That's still being verified and determined. The hot mix contract typically consists of either a overlay of new asphalt, so basically establishing new asphalt on top of a road, or doing something called a mill and pave operation, where they just grind down the old asphalt and they put down a new surface layer of asphalt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Scotchy, final remarks?
Just for clarification purposes, Councillor Pinsino, the remarks he made kind of indicates this is an actual parking lot. Just to clarify, it's actually like a large shoulder. So what we're saying basically is when we pave the road, it's basically the shoulder of the road that affects the area. So it's not like we're paving an actual huge parking lot. It's a shoulder, almost essentially the shoulder of the road. And as Mr. Tiber did indicate as well, is that it has benefits to protecting our infrastructure as well. And Chris, we did have a quick conversation about that, about the benefits to doing this from our municipal standpoint in regards to being beneficial to protecting our infrastructure, keeping the gravel and the drainage off our roads is not that beneficial for our roadway anyways?
Thank you, Mayor Camp. Yes, that's correct. So there is definitely a benefit that will go towards the road with improving this lot with regards to maintenance of the gravel lot and maintenance of the gravel on the existing road, establishing proper curb to delineate the parking lot versus the road, and the curb serves kind of as dual purpose of kind of holding in the asphalt in place for better longevity of the edge lines and the edges of the asphalt. There's a lot more kind of technical aspects involved with how there is a benefit to the road, so that can be argued, of course, yes.
And lastly, this isn't like a major uptaking of a project. This isn't a large area, just so everybody knows that, like when we're talking about paving, it's not a huge area. I wish I had the square footage of it, but it's not a really long area, and it might be, 10 feet wide, 12 feet wide, maybe? Would that be fair to say?
It's on average about the width of a typical vehicle that fits within the right up to that. The sidewalk. So the sidewalk is actually on private property, and then we just own all the parking prior to the sidewalk. So yes, it's not going to be a substantial undertaking, and again, that will be outlined in the capital plan.
Okay, so just to say, we have basically a $3 to $4 million park that cost us no money whatsoever. All I'm asking is that we support our property area and just make it a little bit more sustainable for the people that have trouble and accessibility issues. So thank you for your time, Chris.
Okay, I will put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 19E, motion by Councillor Roche regarding naming of Two Creeks Trail.
Councillor Roche.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry. Hi, Mark. Sorry, lost my glasses. That administration investigate the renaming of Two Creek Trails to the Grant Bowman Trail in accordance with the commemorative naming policy and report back to council. I guess I don't have a date on here. I apologize. If we can do it by December 9th, that would be great.
Can I get a seconder? Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Roche, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, the trail, it doesn't even say where the trail is in here, but it's in Wheatley. Grant Bowman and a few other gentlemen had made this trail years and years ago for Trans-Canada Trails. He lives across the street from this trail, and every year he's been taking care of it. I brought it up probably 3 years ago in the last term to see if we could just put this trail in kind of grandfathered in because it wasn't the right width or anything like that. So 2 years ago now, we were given the go-ahead to have it done. It is done now, but he still is on it every day, picking up sticks and everything else. He does a great job at looking after it. He always has. So I believe he's very worthy to have this, to put this into his name. I also spoke to many people in Wheatley who are definitely for this, and I believe we need some letters maybe to back this up, and I definitely can get them. So if we do, if Judy, it'll probably be Judy.
Judy, can you elaborate on what the process is going to be to do that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Councillor Oche, Meredith had emailed you earlier. There is a process. Council had approved the policy, the naming policy back a year or so ago, and there is a process in place. So I'm not sure that due to the requirements of who we have to notify and the process that needs to be done, that we'll be able to hit the December 9th meeting, but we definitely will try for the January meeting if that's okay.
Well, I can definitely get you any letters that you need of backing. I'm not sure who else. I know you had to talk to Grant as well.
Yeah, we're happy to take the letters, and if we can get it back, we'll get it back to the nearest council meeting that we can. But I'm just, when you put the December 9th into the motion, I'm just saying that due to the requirements of the policy, we may not be able to meet that.
Okay.
Could you be okay with putting no later than the January 16th? Is it 16th? January 13th meeting?
That's fine. Could somebody update me? I'm sorry, on all of the other things that would have to be done besides the letters. I'm talking to Grant.
I see Meredith is getting up and coming to the podium.
Thank you, Meredith. Sorry, I know you sent this to me, but just in case anyone else is thinking the same idea for someone else, I would like people to know what it is.
So for a renaming, which this would be because it's an asset that already has a current name, we would have to research the existing name. So we want to make sure it wasn't named for a reason and what that reason was. We would also investigate the requested name, so the Grant Bowman Trail, and need the letters of support from community members. We would also need permission from Mr. Bowman, since he's living, that he's okay with that being named after him. And then we have to investigate the cost. So we would have to let council know the costs of doing the signage, any promotional material that has the Two Creeks Trails in it. So there is a cost associated with that as well.
Okay. I'm not positive there's a sign up there yet for the Two Creeks Trail. It's Two Creeks Trail at the moment, but yeah, maybe we can hold off if we are making some at the moment. But anyways, okay, I'm fine with having it no later than July 13th, 2020. Thank you.
January 13th. Okay. Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. Just really quickly, I thought I would give comment to council. I've known Grant Bowman now for just over a year, and I would say that he really does embody the true meaning of conservation and being committed to conservation in his community and more broadly within Chatham-Kent. He was an active citizen and still is quite an active citizen. He's also a great mentor to the next generation of active citizens in Wheatley, and often provides his sage wisdom and guidance. So as we go through this process, I really look forward to kind of seeing the outcome of the process that we already have in place. And I look forward to the members around this council table to get to know Grant a bit better in that process as well.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Meredith, my must be frozen again. Thank you. All votes are in, 17-0. Motion passes.
Item 19F, motion by Councillor Hall regarding Wallaceburg Community Hub. And Your Worship, Mr. Kelly would like to address council at some point regarding some of the timelines that are being requested.
Certainly. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Whereas multiple community groups and organizations in Wallaceburg have expressed an interest and need for a new space and location in order to fully maximize their goals, And whereas these groups focus on a wide spectrum within the community, including arts, music, seniors, and inclusiveness, and whereas one of Council's strategic priorities is to take a look at the current facility asset inventory and consider alternative and better uses for these facilities, and whereas the use of public/private partnerships with community groups are ways to move the community forward in a fiscally responsible way, therefore be it resolved that administration investigate and provide options to Council about building a new community hub in Wallaceburg or retrofitting an existing building within the community. Consultation with interested community groups, businesses, and organizations will take place and be incorporated into the report. Staff will report back to Council by April of 2020.
Councillor C. McGregor.
I'd like to second that, please.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, before I open further questions, did you want to make some comments?
Thank you, Mayor. My concerns are with respect to timing and resources. Back in October of this year, we were directed by Council to do a very comprehensive study on all of our assets, which included buildings, in terms of right-sizing, rationalizing, and going through a very detailed process in order to rationalize what we had. This particular motion we are still working on. We plan to come back to Council on December the 9th just to address one aspect, and that is the timing. I can tell you right now, based on the ask, the timing is multiple years to complete all of those different asset categories, and one of the key messages was that you wanted to look at it holistically, all the buildings, all of the roads. So any available capacity right now that we have, we're looking at this study in order to accomplish this particular motion. We did last year, you may recall, we went out to all the different communities. It was led by the CAOs group and also Community Human Services. We spent time in Wallaceburg, Richtown, and so on. And from that study, we did a deep dive into Richtown. I can tell you that we looked at a couple of options. One was retrofitting an old school, and that cost was around $9 to $11 million to retrofit. And it really didn't get any traction, but it was looking at a very similar study of integrating services like customer services out there, senior services, children's services as well, and library. Those were the key. So this is not a trivial task at all. In order for us to handle this right now with what's on our plate, I would ask that we need to hire a program manager to manage all of this, to do the studies. And secondly, when you're asking about retrofitting, we need to employ the services of an architect as well. So those are the challenges that we have. I couldn't possibly do that with the existing staff I have right now based on the October motion that was passed. So the options for Council are few, is that we can put on hold the October work and focus on this. I can share with you and do a deep dive of what we did in Richtown, so you can look at that. And it'll be very similar, I feel. Another option is if you want to just tell me the square footage you're looking at, I can give you an estimate for a new building on that. So trying to give you the timing that you're looking for, but it would be really helpful to my team to give you this kind of timing in April, some flexibility there. And anyway, we have done a lot of work on these in the past, so I wondered if any of those would give you what you needed, and still we could move forward.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. And I do understand some of the difficulties that Thomas is expressing. I do know, though, that there isn't very many places that Councillor Hall and I go within the community that where we have groups that are running out of space or do not have space. We have a concert band that has just been turned out without a home. We have a senior center that is out of space and no ability, well, not no ability, there's a lot that can't use the upper floors of that. We have a little theater that can't do productions in the little theater because of the cost to refit a stage. We have so the list goes on. So everywhere we go and we talk to somebody, it makes some sense if we could put a number of items into a community hub. And I think we could very successfully do that in Wallaceburg. And I would hope that we could have the support of council to be able to look at this. I do know it's difficult, and I know with your timelines, hence why, the report coming in December as to the timelines for the other requests to look at all the inventory of our bridges, roads, et cetera, et cetera. But I think this is really good, and actually, I would actually even ask that this April 2020, ask a friendly amendment of Councillor Hall to have it moved to whatever date coincides with a community meeting in Wallaceburg, because I think it's an actual excellent time if you want to hear from people. And I think doing some community consultation, you would find a big change from when the studies went on before. I know that myself and probably a couple chamber people were the only ones that showed up in the Wallaceburg one, but it was difficult not getting the right information out, including the fact that the Arts Council was playing weekly outside each night, so nobody was coming into the library. They were very much interested in listening to the local entertainment in the park. But so I would just I very much support this, and would love to be able to go back to our community and be able to tell them that, yes, we're going to look at this and try and find a way to make it better. And some of our buildings, could be probably retrofit if we could move some out of some areas. Some of those buildings probably could be retrofit for the future for affordable housing, which is just something else we should be looking at when it comes to doing anything with all of our buildings.
Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. As Thomas mentioned, I went through this whole exercise in Ridgetown as well. I think the concept of it is good. However, once you get into the dollars and cents, it doesn't make sense anymore. I guess my question through to the mover, are you planning on, as part of this hub, moving some of the CK services in there? That's what they were going to do in Ridgetown. Okay. And I guess the financing part of it, is the plan for it to be all paid for by the municipality, or are you looking at fundraising, or?
This basically, I want to get the process started. This has really been driven by the community. It's not like there's a community hub group in Wallaceburg that's asking for this. This stemmed from multiple instances of engagement in the community, not one particular group, but many that had the idea and had a potential solution that derived from some of the meetings that Mayor Caniff led around the community with different community groups. We heard this idea, and this kept coming up about, why don't we look at this community hub idea? Some of the other meetings that Councillor Carmen McGregor and I do in the coffee shops before council meetings, we heard a lot about this idea and this concept through that as well. So to answer your question, Councillor Pinsino, I think the part of the motion that says to look at some of our current infrastructure or some of our facility, maybe some of the services that are offered in the by the municipality could be looked at coming into this potential type of facility. But in terms of fundraising, I'm looking at advice from or not just fundraising, but financing this type of a project. I want staff to give me some feedback on that as well. I've tried to keep a real open mind with this. I know this is something that it wasn't an election promise or anything that I did. This is a result of engagement in the community, and I think it warrants having having staff look into, see what some of our options are.
Can I just add to that? Just I've been part of these discussions throughout, just hearing. I would envision as well organizations be putting money towards it. There'd be fundraising. Certainly, the municipality would put some money towards it. But I believe this is driven by economics. Like when I look at it, the amount of groups that are willing to step forward and consolidate in, that I believe that's why I look at the feasibility of economics. If you come back and say it's going to cost $15 million again, we'll get to the same result we did in Ridgetown. But I believe there's opportunities here to actually look and say, you know what, we in the long run, when you look at 40 years, we can save money by decommissioning these X number of buildings, putting it in here, having other groups step to the table. So that's kind of what we've been talking about here, is that piece of it.
I promoted the hub idea when it was talked about in Ridgetown, and honestly, it did drag on so long, and the cost wasn't feasible, that the seniors over there, they've gone ahead now, and they're almost ready to turn soil to build their new one. They got tired of waiting as well. But I have no problem getting this report. I think it's a good idea. However, it just may be cost prohibitive in the end, and I know I don't want the tax base to foot the whole bill.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I guess more of a question regarding the Ridgetown one. I know there was quite a movement to go to the different communities and to start these hub facilities type thing. The government was sort of pushing it, and that was the older government, I guess. What kind of funding was available at the time for that? Do you remember, April?
Through you, Mayor Caniff. Through to Councillor Foss, you are correct. The previous government took a strong kind of stand in terms of supporting and trying to move us to a community hub model. Having said that, even at that time, there was no capital dollars available from higher levels of provincial or federal government to support that. They looked at the concept of if you brought agencies together, there would eventually be some cost savings that would come out of that. Ridgetown, I support Councillor Pinsonow's comments. We tried really, really hard to look at bringing groups together, to look at rationalizing buildings, to look at moving a number of groups into one location, first with a new build that came in at around $13 million to do that new build, then retrofitting an available building that is, a boarded up building in that community, and retrofitting that came in around $10 million. Or between 9 and 10 million, depending on what we were doing. So it ended up, and then the issue came of, some of the municipal buildings, in terms of looking at rationalizing those buildings, would create significant empty space in downtown Ridgetown. So then, balancing the act of trying to juggle all of those things meant we had a seniors group who said, you know what, never mind, we're going to go it alone and build a really tiny new senior center, is what they are going to do now, and do that on their own. So these are very, very costly initiatives, but I don't think that should stop us from having some consultation and having some community groups come together to look at what can we do collectively, and then kind of try and figure out what's the cost to that. But again, there was no provincial and no federal funding to support it, just the mandate to look at it.
Just a bit further, I guess I want to ask Thomas, as to the requests there, what kind of time frame and what kind of workload are you looking at by doing this?
Thank you, Mayor. So we do not have available capacity now, and that's what I mentioned based on that other study from October that was approved, looking at rationalization. We are struggling with that particular amount of work, and you'll see that struggle on December 9th. We'll have a report, and it's going to show that it's going to take us multiple years to get all of that work done. So we can do this, but I'm asking for some funding to go with that, because I'd like to hire a program manager to manage all of this, to set up the community meetings, and then an architect as well to help assist with the design of it. So, that an architect for the work that we're talking here will be in the range of $6,000 to $7,000, and then the cost of a body for say half a year. And we could report back in April, set that as a deadline. So for half a year, probably another $50,000 or so on top of that. So that's the kind of cost that we're looking at. I simply don't have the capacity, at the same time being asked on the other motion to go look at all of our assets. And by the way, the work that we're doing on that project would include some of the work you're talking about, right? Is consolidating buildings. So they're somewhat inclusive of each other. It's a lot of work to do. So that's why I say I can give you some high-level estimates. If you know the square footage, give me an estimate, give me a number. I can do that very quickly. But when you're looking at all of this consolidation, the design, if you're looking at retrofitting a building, any old building, we have to bring up to code, and that's where the real expertise comes into play. So happy to do it. I just need some help financially with some resources.
So if we approve this motion, we can't do it unless there's a dollar value involved in it.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much. Just to piggyback off of what Councillor Pinsonneau was saying, April, how long did we work in Ridgetown on that? Because I remember attending a couple of the meetings.
Through you, Mayor Caniff, through you, Councillor Thompson, we worked in Ridgetown specifically, probably about a year and more. And then we spent an entire summer, so 2.5 months, going out to do community consultation with every community throughout Chatham-Kent to talk to them about community hubs. What were they looking for? What would they like to see? Those kinds of things we've done already for that piece. So it was a long time.
It was a lot of work. I remember it. And again, to echo Councillor Pinsonneau's comments, I was a big supporter of the idea of a community hub. And what I'd learned sort of through that experience was that from a municipal service standpoint, it makes sense to tie these services together into one building. In Blenheim, for instance, we have the library, the police station, our municipal center, and the post office all in one building. And even the post office causes some people some trouble because they can't get in there after hours. So even right there's an issue, but we muddle through. And what I remember especially was that you would get a lot of disparate viewpoints of what they needed into a building, and the scope would expand and expand and expand to the point where some people would say they were out. And again, the whole thing kind of unfortunately fell apart. And now you see the senior center going it alone. The Blenheim Senior Center went it alone a few years back as well, without much municipal help. Mr. Kelly, can you ballpark how many municipal buildings we have in Wallaceburg right now? Ish.
Well, are we counting arenas? I don't think so, right? Anything associated with that.
Right.
So, I'm going to say 10 in that range.
10 buildings. So that, could potentially, I don't mind the idea of retrofitting, I suppose. I struggle with the idea of getting a lot of municipal money involved here. I like the idea, and I think potentially the staff could share some information and help to coordinate stakeholders' meetings and whatnot. I don't think it has to be near as involved as what Mr. Kelly is stating. I think we could honestly pull out a lot of information from the Ridgetown report as well. I'd hate to see this die on the table. So I still don't know where I'm going to go. In the future, I shudder at the idea of getting too much municipal money, be it through hiring or be it through funding a $13 million build in Wallaceburg. Not that it isn't deserved, but I think about all the other communities and the work they've done too. Thanks.
Thank you, Worship. So recognizing that Councillor Hall is, he's brought forward in Councillor C. McGregor has also raised the issue about the amount of community engagement. If it's a matter of trying to sit down with a community group, I know there's 2 or 3 facilities that people are considering right now, and to say, here's the square footage, we can come back and we can, give that information to Mr. Kelly. We can then estimate sort of what a ballpark figure is, and then we can start looking around and saying, is there some funding that makes sense? I mean, if we find it's a $10 million figure, that may be something we're going to, have a longer planning horizon. If we find it's much less than that, then maybe we can go ahead and do some other things. But I think Mr. Kelly's, being responsible and saying that if we need a fulsome study so you can come back to council and say, this is the cost of actually building that facility, that's a very in-depth analysis. So I'd be prepared to work with our 2 ward council members to actually meet with some of the community groups, gather some of the preliminary information, and then come back and actually look at that in the context of what we did in Wallaceburg, in Bridgetown. But I think the fulsome study that we're talking about is a very in-depth analysis that both April and Tom have referred to, and I think that's just something where once we've done the preliminary piece and council can give us further direction as to whether we can do something else. But we could certainly meet with the community leadership and discuss what the options are and get an idea of what the cost is. If that's what your intent is, and I think we could certainly make that happen.
I've got Councillor Wright up here first. We're nearing the end here. We got 8 minutes. We're going to have to quickly ask for an extension if we continue on. So,
thank you, Mayor. The building in Ridgetown, they've downsized it to 7,500 square feet. They own the land, and they're still looking at $2.6 million, and they're shovel ready. But they're at $2.6 million for a small building. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. And I was just would like to comment a little bit back on Mr. Kelly's comments about giving him the square footage, which is, to me, kind of the cart before the horse until we talk to the community, as Don was saying, to find out, we've had people come to us and say that they would be willing to be a part of it, people from the senior center, but we haven't talked to the senior center executive to make sure that it's not other people carrying it out. Same thing, we have talked to the Little Theater, they're definitely a part. We have talked to the Wallaceburg Concert Band, and they would be more than happy to move in there. If we could get the right thing, I don't see any reason why we couldn't be putting the library and, the municipal office and different things in this building. So, I think it needs to be considered. I think it needs to start with community consultation, and which was part of this motion that was, we were looking for information, I think, then to be able to go to community consultation through this. And getting a report back. It would still be nice to, and I see that didn't get changed on there, that friendly amendment, but it would still be nice to have, even if it was an interim report, to come to Wallaceburg when we do the council meeting in Wallaceburg. I think it's a great time, and you would also get a very good feel for how the community feels about a community hub.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor.
Your support and change that motion and modify that motion.
I'll go to Councillor Solomon for a comment, and then I'll go to Councillor Hall to see if there's any modifications from the discussion here, and we'll put it to vote. Councillor Solomon?
I was just going to move to defer it because it appears from what I heard through your worship I heard from the CAO, he's quite willing to participate in discussions with the councillors and with the community, and there's no,
I don't think we have any control.
Quite clear that we're going to have a report back in December, and why would we vote on this and turn it down or approve it until we know what's going on with Mr. Kelly's report in December? And I, for one, don't like the idea of adding staff and adding a whole bunch of money when we don't know what the plan is for December. And if I'm hearing there's not enough resources to look at it through a financial lens, we can't. You've got to think of what these things cost, and you've got to do it rationally, and that's, I think, what Mr. Kelly's suggesting. So I don't know why we wouldn't defer this and let administration do their thing, and I'd like to move that it be deferred until administration comes back with it.
Okay, do we have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Thompson. Any other questions relating to that motion of deferring this? Oh, sorry.
So I just want to clarify, so we don't have a motion to defer. Are we postponing till a certain time or postponing or referring it back to administration?
That's what we're doing. We're referring it back to administration for meetings to be held.
Okay, so any other questions regarding the motion that we're going to put up? We're going to put that up there?
Yeah,
Or
she's probably just typing
Okay.
it right now.
Because I think, well, as we go through, we're going to have to cut out non-agenda business in order to get to 10 unless we get an extension, unless someone asks for an extension. All right, so we got a motion up here that the report be referred back to administration for public meetings to be held in Wallaceburg. It's in Wallaceburg, not on?
Sure.
All right, so that's, Councillor Solomon, this is the motion you're putting forth? Councillor Thompson? Okay. Any other questions related to this before we put a vote? Councillor Hall.
Yeah, I believe my motion, this was part of my motion, is to have the public meetings and have the engagement in the community of Wallaceburg. So I'd like to see my motion come up so that we can vote on it tonight and move forward with it.
So just to explain this motion on the floor, if it passes now, it will be this and we won't go to the other motion. It's been referred back to administration. If this motion fails, then the original motion goes back on the floor.
Okay. So we'll vote on this and put it up.
All votes are in. Motion passes 9-7.
Item 20, closed session reports.
Thank you. Thank you. And through the mayor, I would move that we receive the closed session report for November 18th. Not in attendance was Councillor Finn. Council directed administration on proposed disposition of land by the municipality with regard to offer to purchase 55 Mini Street, Wallaceburg, Section 2392C of the Municipal Act. And Council received information on proposed disposition of land by the municipality or local board and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with regard to WDC Rail Update, Section 2392C and F of the Municipal Act, 2001.
Any seconder for that? Councillor Latimer. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Oh, sorry, need electronic vote.
Oh, okay. I got an idea of it. I think so.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor Kirkwood. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 21, approval of communication items. Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Pinsino. Any items to take out? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Yes, Councillor Solomon.
I'd like to move that non-agenda items be postponed until the next meeting.
Okay, here a seconder on that? Councillor McGrail. Do I need electronic vote on this? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried to defer non-agenda business. Item 23, reading of the bylaws, first and second reading. Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Oche. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. The third and final reading, Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Foss. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Resolution of Council.
Thank you. I'd move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn itself to the next meeting to be held on Monday, December 2nd, 2019, and the Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. And since non-agenda business items are not going to be held until December 2nd, I would just mention that if any of you are out and about, Thursday night there will be a wonderful Christmas BIA function in the downtown of Wallaceburg. We'll be all lit up and enjoyed.
And seconded by Councilor Pinsino. All in favor? Opposed? Adjourned.